It's like church.
We're good? Okay. Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Welcome to the Town of Woodfin Board of Adjustment meeting on January 25th, 2023. This is a special meeting being held tonight. Okay, first of all, we have to do some administrative work and have an election of a chairperson. Do I have any motions or nominations?
I'd like to nominate Michael Bennett.
I'll second that.
Take a vote, I guess roll vote. Everybody approved for Michael Bennett?
Yep.
Okay. That motion is approved. Shannon, can I ask you a question? I guess we have to now also elect a vice chairman? Yeah. Okay, I'd like to make a motion, or I'd like to ask if somebody has a motion to nominate a vice chairman.
Scott.
I will make a motion to nominate Scott.
Scott.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Yeah.
Okay, those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so moved. So Scott is vice chairman. Next online, we're going to certify a quorum for tonight. We have the proper amount of people, so we are able to certify that we're good to go for tonight.
That is correct.
Okay, next thing, roll call. So Michael Bennett, chairman of the Board of Adjustment.
Stephanie Gosnell.
Scott Hansen.
Patrizia Hoffman.
Chris DeRoni.
Okay, thank you. Next step will be motion of pro hoc vici.
Vici. Yep. Members of the board, there's been a motion made before you all to admit Attorney Josh Portnoy, who is licensed in the state of North Carolina. He is asking to be admitted for the practice of law in North Carolina for the specific purpose of appearing before you. He submitted a motion and supporting documents, and I would just ask that the sponsoring attorney and Mr. Portnoy come up and say anything that they have or that they need to for you all, and then once that's done, if you all approve them, to allow Mr. Portnoy to appear in front of you. Mr. Bennett, there is an order for you to sign. Madam Clerk will give you the motion and the signed order, and then we'll give Mr. Swart another signed order back.
Good afternoon, members of the board. I'm Jesse Swords from Allen, Stahl & Kilbourne, attorney for HS Robin Hood Ogre. Your hearing. Minor correction, he's licensed in the state of Georgia.
What did I say?
Said North Carolina.
North Carolina.
Oh, I apologize. Sorry. Thank you.
And, this is Josh Portnoy. He's general counsel for Higher Sky. Any questions you may have, be happy to answer.
I appreciate your consideration of the motion.
There's a, oh, go ahead, John.
On behalf of the appellant, there's no objection to the motion.
Thank you.
I was going to say that there's some processes and procedures under 84-4.1, but if there's no objection, if the board wanted to look at the motion, you're more than welcome to. Otherwise, it would be up for a motion to allow Mr. Portnoy to appear in front of this board for this particular purpose.
Okay, how do you pronounce your last name again?
Portnoy.
Port?
Noy.
Noy, okay. Are there any questions, concerns on the board? Okay, so I have a motion to approve certifying the attorney to appear in this court.
I'll make a motion.
Okay, second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Motion passes, so you are,
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Welcome to North Carolina.
Yeah, right.
Mr. Bennett, if I can just get you to sign, there should be two of them.
What a lot of paperwork.
Yep, right there, sign that one, and then I'll get you this one.
so signature, print it. and-
Yep. heat on in here.
Yeah, it is warm, I know.
Yep, I want to do that one too. Today's date, 25th.
25. I didn't have it up for about an hour.
We're all roasting up here.
This will be the first of many exhibits that's going to be given to you to hold on to as part of the complete record.
It was just Elk Mountain Road.
Not that, well, I mean, that's just the motion and the sign. They'll have plenty of exhibits. Do you not usually hold on to them? I'm happy to hold on to them if you,
And then I can attach them to the record if the record is ordered.
yep, that's right, yep.
So when you hand them to me, will they come through you, all of them come through you?
They'll probably likely come from like the witness or one of the attorneys.
Oh.
But I'm happy to keep them first and give them to you tonight. How about we do
So
that?
that I can, so if you can put a number on it, so
Yep.
that I have.
Perfect. We'll do that.
Air feels good.
Yeah,
And then I present whatever.
All we had to do was say something.
I know, yeah, and it happened.
Yep, I will do that.
Do I still read this before this? Pretty much. This or this replacement?
Either one you can read, so that is basically the same thing as this, so everyone can feel. Yeah, and then-
I don't want to.
They're all the same.
Okay, we're good? All right. Okay, tonight's special meeting. The board will now take up an administrative appeal of Jessica and Alex Bernstein and Citizens for the Responsible Land Use from the determination of Shannon Tuck, interim planning director, contained in a letter dated September 30th, 2022, concerning the Robinson Road development application for property identified by TIN 9740-28-8969 and 9740-29-9345. Under North Carolina law, this is a quasi-judicial proceeding which involves the board making specific findings of facts regarding the appeal. The purpose of this proceeding is for the board to hear and consider the evidence presented, make interpretations of the appropriate town ordinance, and apply such interpretations to the evidence provided in this manner. The board must base its decision upon competent, material, and substantial evidence presented at the hearing. The board will determine, based upon such evidence, whether the decision of the board should be reserved or affirmed, wholly or partly, or modified by this board to ensure compliance with the standards contained in the town's zoning ordinance. Since this hearing will be quasi-judicial in nature, the board can only entertain testimony or other evidence which is germane to this case. Further, such testimony or evidence can only be presented by those parties with standing. Okay. Determination of party status. The town and property owner, if different from the appellate, are determined by the parties with standing in this manner. Other persons are entitled to give testimony and present evidence, but only if it can be shown that such person has standing. If anyone wishes to become party to this proceeding, please advise the board at this time.
Good evening, Your Honor. Used to make a report. Mr. Chairman, my name's John Noor. I'm an attorney here in Nashville with Roberts. I represent Bernstein's as well as Citizens for Responsible Land. They are the appellants in this case, and they are seeking standing to that appeal. We're happy to put on evidence related to both of their standing. Whenever you're two witnesses that are on the Zoom, Microsoft Teams. And then I have Ms. Bernstein with me here. Mr. Bernstein, unfortunately, wasn't able to be with us today. He had a you were saying right now, so trying to get back, but not back yet. So, however you would like to proceed.
And, Mr. Chair, to determine party standing, right, you all are just looking, as we did during the training, just looking for credible allegations that they'll suffer some special damages distinct from the rest of the community. It's not their opportunity to present their case, but just to present enough information for you all to make a determination as to whether or not they will suffer special damages, which amounts to maybe a reduction in the property value of their property because of certain items or certain issues related with the development, traffic noise, litter, glare, odor, dust. And so now would be the appropriate time, after the witnesses will be sworn in, for them to just present their credible allegations of why they should be deemed to have standing to participate in this hearing.
Would we also need to hear any others first who want to name themselves and then have each?
Yep, and so we've got the property owner, Mr. Sword standing up, I'm going to say, I'm sure.
If the board would like to hear me now, we just want to note objection for the record. We are objecting to Bernstein's and Sierra U having standing in this appeal. However, we are willing to, for the purpose of this hearing, not challenge their ability to present their case to the board, if they had standing and all of that stuff. But we are reserving our right to challenge it if this goes to court later, which is contemplated by the statute. But we want to, number one, note that objection, and number two, just let the board know that we are willing to have you take this evidence in whatever efficient manner you deem advisable. We'd be happy to provide affidavits or anything else like that. Just to let you know our position on that.
Thank you.
And so then, yes, correct, Mr. Vice Chair, if there's anybody else out in the audience other than the individuals represented by Mr. Knorr and the property owner represented by Mr. Portnoy and Mr. Swart, if there's anybody else out there who deems that they have credible allegations sufficient to uphold standing or to support standing, please raise your hand and we'll get your names.
Okay, seeing none?
Seeing none, then it would be, we'll swear in the witnesses for standing purposes, and then Mr. Knorr, I don't know how you're going to present it, if it's by affidavit or by sworn testimony.
So that would also include the people in there will get sworn in now?
Yes.
Okay.
Where, just for Ms. Bernstein, will be testifying, where would you like her? Would you like her at the podium? I've heard that maybe it's going to be where the Bible is over there. What works best?
To present evidence or for swearing in?
So swearing in.
Well, for presenting testimony.
Oh.
We were contemplating having witnesses there, so we have a good mic connection, and then if attorneys are asking questions, maybe they can see them.
Okay, so attorneys from the podium and witnesses from that area over there. Okay. I guess you would like to bring your first.
Do you want to do a global swearing in of everyone?
Yes, if we could just get everyone that's going to testify. Mr. Chair's on the back side of that page, the oath, at the very
So-
top.
Apologize. This is.
Yeah, no problem.
So we don't have to do anything else as far as having standing. They can have standing.
Not yet. They're going to, they have to, for the record, enter.
It's not, I can continue.
Okay.
No, he's just asking me the process of what we're looking through at here. But then for me, what we're doing is they will be sworn in to present their credible allegations of standing.
Okay.
They're not presenting their case, then we'll move on into that.
Okay.
They just have to do that for the record.
Okay. Okay, I'm sorry. First,
We'll start with Ms. Bernstein, but do you want to do swearing in?
Yeah, I guess I'll do that. If anybody who's going to testify on behalf of you, Mr. North, they can raise their right hand.
And Mr. Finley and Mr. Robeson, if you could come on screen so the board can see you as you take the oath.
All right, all parties, raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please say I do.
I do.
Very well.
Daniel, you're on mute, just so we get.
Sorry. I do.
Thank you.
At this time, Mr. Chairman, we'll call Ms. Bernstein as our first witness related to standing. This will just cover the standing portion of this substance of the case.
Okay.
Do you want me to do a little testing, check?
Ms. Tuck, is that where you wanted her?
Yeah, we thought that would be best.
Okay.
The microphones, just so everybody knows, the microphones are more for the live stream than they are for the room, so.
Speak loud.
Speak out, okay.
All right.
Good evening, Ms. Bernstein. Can you report your full name, please?
It's Jessica Bernstein, Jessica Ann Bernstein,
And Ms. Bernstein, where do you live?
36 Beaver Brook Road.
Okay, where is that in proximity to the proposed development site?
We are, our parcel is actually surrounded on 3 sides by the development, directly to the south across the street from where there's the proposed access to the development site.
And how long have you lived at that location?
We purchased the house late spring 2020, early pandemic, and then moved in January 5th, 2021.
And who else lives with you at that location?
My husband, Alex, and our son, who's 11, Max, and a rowdy dog,
Rowdy dog. What's the rowdy dog's name?
River.
River. You and Alex own the property?
We do.
Okay. And are you and Alex also members of Citizens for Responsible Land Use Incorporated?
We are.
Okay, and I'll refer to that as CRLU throughout, so I just think it's easier to say. Did you and Alex authorize me to file the appeals that are before the board this evening?
Yes.
Okay, and did CRLU also do the same, authorize you to speak on their behalf tonight,
Yes.
and also authorize me to file the appeal on their behalf?
Yes.
I want to hand you a document that's marked as Exhibit 5.1.
It's marked as exhibit 5.1?
5.1, I believe.
5.1. I have copies for everyone, so.
Thank you, John.
I'm going to throw it up on the screen for
Okay.
you, Ms. Bernstein. but I'll make a copy here. Here's extra space. Ms. Bernstein, I've thrown Exhibit 5.1 up on the screen here for you to review. Can you identify what this is?
This is the Articles of Incorporation restatement, I guess, for the CRLU.
And are these the most recent ones for CRLU?
Yes, 2017.
Okay. And as part of that document, I'm going to flip forward here. This is an attachment to that. Can you read for the board what the purposes of CRLU are in that second paragraph?
The additional purposes?
Yes.
The first is to prevent any high-density development on steep slope property by any legal means available. Second, if failing to prevent development, to ameliorate the negative impacts of development by any legal means available. Third, to work towards placement of steep slope property into an appropriate conservancy. And fourth, to provide educational opportunities to the public regarding the negative effects of high-density development on steep slopes in western North Carolina.
And are you part of some of that work that CRLU does, the educational portion?
Yes, I have been.
And you made presentations on their behalf related to some of the issues identified in their purpose?
I have.
And CRLU was, I think originally created in 2016, correct?
Yes.
So before the applications that are at issue in this appeal, CRLU was formed in years before.
Yes.
I think those are my questions related to standing. Well, I have a couple extra. On your behalf, did we retain Mr. Finley and Mr. Robeson, who were with us remotely tonight, in order to do an analysis of the proposed development's impact on your property?
Yes.
Okay. Those are my questions. For Ms. Bernstein.
Guess I can open the board for any questions from the board to ask.
Yep, the board has an opportunity to ask questions, and I don't know that Mr. Sward or Mr. Henning, are you going to have any questions, but it can be opened up.
Mr. Chairman, I'm John Henning, I'm the town attorney. The town is clearly a party to this matter by statute. We are not planning on taking a position on standing for either of the other parties.
Thank you. Does the board have any
I have a
questions?
question. You purchased your property in 2019? or
2020.
2020, and you moved in 2021. Were you associated with the CRLU before, prior to?
No, we were not members
Okay,
then.
because I know that they said that this was 2016 or something, right?
Mhm.
Okay, just curious.
Any other questions? So we have to make a motion?
I just
Oh,
want to
sorry.
confirm, so can you describe where your property is located again?
Yes. If you can picture the site, and you're coming up Beaverbrook Road, which dead ends, and the property, the project area, it kind of surrounds all of that. Where Beaverbrook Road dead ends, it goes up for quite a bit, and it also comes back down. And we are on the downside, and so if you see, when you're looking at some of those plans that I see, if you look at where the proposed driveway entrance is into the property, we're right across from that. So on the downside of Beaverbrook Road, we're the only house that's down there, past the corner.
Mr. Chairman, just for a clarifying question, based on the member's question, presuming this is from the record of
Thank you.
decision that we have, might help just illustrate the point here. Jessica, just so the board's aware, is this your home site right here?
Yes.
Okay. And is that, meaning, you identified you're surrounded by the proposed lot here where the development occur,
Right.
and here immediately across the street from it?
Right,
Correct?
yes.
The reason I ask is, in determining standing, it sounds like that's a unique position to be in comparison to other people in the neighborhood that your property is kind of surrounded by, so it would
Right.
impact you differently.
Can make a motion to grant standing?
Yep, any other questions, Mr. Portnoy?
Sorry.
Yes, sorry, members of the board, may I approach the podium?
Yes, please.
Thank you very much. I just have a few questions. Ms. Bernstein, we may be calling you later in the case, but as Mr. Noor said, we'll reserve our right to address that. I just have a few questions relating to your acquisition of the property and then also related to CRLU. You mentioned you purchased the property in, I believe, June of 2020. Is that correct?
I can't remember the closing date, but yeah, it was early summer, late spring.
And when you purchased it, you were aware of the fact that it was zoned as Mountain Village, correct?
My property?
No, the property at issue in this case.
Yes.
And so you knew that the property at issue in this case was likely subject to development at some point in the future, correct?
I knew it was an undeveloped lot zoned Mountain Village.
I'm going to go ahead and pre-mark, I don't know, you started with exhibit 5.
Mine will be marked from the Bernstein, so if you want to have,
Start with 1.
yeah, wherever you want to start.
Can we pre-mark this as exhibit 1?
Josh, I'll take
Yeah.
it. Thanks.
I'm sorry?
Oh, bingo, thank you.
Need a bigger
Yeah,
pointer.
yeah. And I'll keep that original. That's fine. Yep. And do you have one for the witness, Mr. Portnoy? No, these are just yours. I'll keep copies for the record.
Okay, thank you.
for asking. Thank you. Oh, yeah.
This is exhibit 1?
We're gonna make
Yes,
this
for the
4.1
property
or
owner.
3.1, or what do you want to make this?
Just one.
Just one? Okay.
All right, Ms. Bernstein, I've handed you what's been marked as exhibit 1. And it's my understanding from your prior testimony that you're here to testify on behalf of CRLU, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And do you recognize this document as being the initial articles of incorporation that was filed by CRLU on May 3rd, 2016?
It appears to be.
At this point, I'd like to move to admit exhibit 1 into the record.
You can ask if anybody has any objection to that.
Okay, does anybody have any objection to submitting this as exhibit 1?
I don't have an objection.
Okay, so this will be admitted, yes, please. Yes.
And can you please turn to attachment A? And then where do you see the section that says 8 other provisions?
Yes.
Can you please read that into the record?
Purposes. The purposes of the organization are, first, to prevent the Cornerstone development from commencing by any legal means available. Second, to prevent any other developer from building on the steep slope property by any legal means available. Third, if failing to prevent development, to ameliorate the negative impacts of development by any legal means available. And fourth, to purchase the property to place into an appropriate conservancy.
So based on those, you would agree with me that all the proposed purposes of CRLU when it formed was to prevent the development of what is called here the Cornerstone property, correct?
Those were the purposes when the organization was established, yes.
And the Cornerstone property also included the property that's at issue in this appeal, correct?
I'll just object for the record here, it says Cornerstone Development. It's a mistake of the actual.
I'll repeat it. And you would agree that the Cornerstone development included the property that is currently at issue in this appeal, correct?
The Cornerstone development included this property. Yes.
That's all I have on the standing issue. Again, we reserve our right to address have other questions later in the case. Thank you.
Just a couple of redirects. I'll be brief. To be clear, Ms. Bernstein, this is the old articles, correct?
Correct.
These are no longer in effect, correct?
Correct.
The ones that we talked about are the current ones.
Correct.
Which has the expanded purpose beyond what's in this document.
Yes.
Just as housekeeping, I failed to ask, but I've asked that Exhibit 5 be admitted into the record as well.
Okay, yes.
Bernstein CRLU.
It will be admitted.
And Mr. Noor, I think the exhibits that you handed us include Exhibit 5.1, 5.2, and 5.3.
And I will be more specific with that, because my numbers on the documents are more specific. It would be 5.1 all the way through 5.4.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, yes, okay. They will be, all 4 will be admitted. Can I not ask questions?
Yes, for standing
Responses to questions?
purposes.
Yes, for standing.
Yep, absolutely.
Is answered. Do you know when these other provisions were changed, from the 2016 to the 28, well, to what, when were they changed?
In 2017.
Okay.
Yeah, it's there on the first page. 5.3.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other questions from the attorneys?
A little bit difficult for me to go to the podium between technology, but I will try and do that. Can everyone hear me?
And Mr. Chairman, let me just briefly address on behalf of the town administration. The one concern that I think administration has with making sure that these microphones are used when, especially when we're in direct hearing, I don't know that, every single procedural motion or anything that comes up has to be directed that way, but the intent of the town administration is to share this in a live stream, or obviously in a limited amount of space. They do want their public to be as fully aware of the entire proceeding as possible. So that's the reason, and I have the same issue as a little bit of
I'm
office.
happy to help, and maybe at the first break, I can print off a couple of questions that I've got on my computer.
I can see it
Let
do the
me-
same thing. It'd be
Let me do
perfect.
the same thing, that'll let me meet both meetings. So, just one final question, well, I'll come back to this. Unless there's any other questions from Ms. Bernstein, I'd like to move on to my next witnesses.
Just a motion to approve or disapprove, Ms. Bernstein, for,
Motion to approve, or,
I've got the witnesses for,
well, we're doing one at a time, correct?
these are the experts about the special damages.
So these are
Okay.
experts that are going to testify to give this
That's right.
person
About
standing.
whether Ms. Bernstein has
Okay.
suffered special
Okay.
damages distinct from
Okay.
the community at large.
and I apologize, I thought she testified that she had experts prepared to testify to that, which was credible allegations, but if you want, yes, I don't want to cut you off, Mr. Noor.
Okay.
We'll start with Mr. Finley. Give me a second.
Yeah.
I was saying, can I make an announcement that we're going to stop this meeting at 9 PM within reason?
Oh,
Should I say that, or, you know?
yeah, I think they all know that because that was part of
So
the
don't worry about it.
stipulations, yeah.
Yeah, we'll just, I don't want to pull a surprise at 8:59. This is going to be long, so if you say you need a break, please. This is going to be a while, so if you tell me if you need a break or something. Sure. Let's take a break then.
What if we not off?
You're being recorded. It's right here. Appreciate the board for that moment. Mr. Finley, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Can you give your full name for the court reporter?
Daniel Findley.
And were you and your colleague, Chris Cunningham, retained by the Bernsteins and Citizens for responsible land use to perform an analysis on the proposed development, determine what impact, if any, it would have on the Bernsteins' property?
Yes.
Okay. And where do you currently work?
I currently work at NC State University's Institute for Transportation Research and Education, but I would like to note that I'm not on behalf of or to represent NC State or the institute where I work.
Okay. This is independent work that you're doing, unaffiliated with the university, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And what's your title with your current employer?
I'm an associate director at the Institute for Transportation Research and Education, and I'm also an adjunct assistant professor in the Department of Civil Construction and Environmental Engineering.
And do you have any degrees that qualify you to work in this area?
Yes, I have 3 degrees in civil engineering. Each of these focus on transportation. Each of these 3 are from NC State University, and there's a bachelor's, a master's of science, and a PhD.
Really, I should be calling you Dr. Finley, I think, so I apologize for that.
That's your prerogative, yes.
Have you, so I hear that, you said, how long have you been teaching in that area?
I've been teaching technical training programs and courses since 2007, and I've been teaching at the university traffic engineering and highway design classes since 2010, and I am also a registered professional engineer in the state of North Carolina.
Okay. And have you been published in the area of transportation engineering?
Yes, 45 or 46 peer-reviewed journal articles and 3 textbooks.
And are you familiar with the Institute of Transportation Engineers?
Yes, they are a primary source for information and expertise in these type of development studies, and we use them for their trip generation handbook is one of the primary references we use from ITE.
Okay. Have you worked for or published with this organization?
Yes, so in addition to them being a resource for engineers, they do publish documents. I was an author on their Manual of Transportation Engineering Studies, and perhaps of most relevance to this study in this case, I was the author of Chapter 22, which is the chapter on traffic access and impact studies, which is exactly the type of evaluation we were asked to perform.
You're the author essentially of the chapter that is used as a treatise within this industry, correct?
That's correct, and I also wrote Chapter 4 of a different document with ITE, which is the seventh edition of the Traffic Engineering Handbook, and we've also published at least 2 papers in their journal on traffic impact studies, a couple of different development types that we looked at and published this work for other professionals to use in their studies.
And are you familiar with the roadways at issue surrounding the proposed development?
Yes, I've done a site visit. I'm also from Graham County, so a little further southwest from where you are today, and so I'm certainly familiar with the type of roads and developments that occur in mountainous areas.
And did you do, I think I heard you say you did a site visit, correct?
That's correct. I've both driven on the main streets in the area of the development as well as walked up and down the street. So took measurements and detailed site observations and photos.
Okay. Have you ever been qualified as an expert before in front of either this board or some other quasi-judicial body?
Yes, this board in particular, approximately, I guess, 12 to 24 months ago, and at least one other board in another community.
I am marking what's been marked as Exhibit 1.1. I'm going to clean up copies as well. Is this an affidavit that you prepared that includes your resume?
That is correct, Mr. Noor.
I'd ask that this be admitted into the record, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. So this is 1.1. We made the last one 1.0. Should we?
I would ask for just a few moments too for us to review, just to see if there's any objections to the affidavit, since this is the first time we've had an opportunity to see it.
Okay.
And this is on his side. This is the,
Can we call it
that one.
5.5?
Yeah, it's a
She'll put
5
them all in order, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
I mean, can.
And for clarity in the record, the exhibit is actually 1.1 all the way through 1.29.
So for the other one, can we make that 2.0 instead of 1.0, or that'd be confusing?
So you've got two parties, you've got CRLU and you've got the property owners. They're going to introduce the exhibits under their own separate numbers.
Okay.
So I
So they're not
apologize
our
for that.
numbers.
They're not our numbers,
Okay.
no. Oh, thank you.
Okay.
Let me see if they have an objection.
Usually worse.
John, I apologize. The sticker on the second page is cutting off some of the words. Is there a way just to know what those words are?
Yeah, I can move that if you want to. I think it says, "and developing a professional opinion."
Okay, that's what I figured. I just want to make sure that.
We're good to review these?
Yeah, not yet. Hold on, he's going to look at them. I'll hand them out one.
Sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
We'll get used to this.
Mhm.
Yeah, you should have sat next to him.
It's nothing.
Yeah.
Is that what you're asking when he? ITE, the Institute of Traffic Engineering. Institute of Transportation Engineers, sorry, I misstated that.
While we're waiting, your board members could try to pull their microphones closer to them. We're hearing that it's a little bit hard to hear.
Yeah.
I'll speak up too. Yeah. Will do.
Yeah, we just like an opportunity to ask the witness about some information on his methodology, and then go from there.
And we're going to be presenting the full report, so, and going through that, so I feel like that's something that we dealt with on cross-examination at that time, if that works for the board.
It's up to you, Mr. Chairman, if you want to allow Mr. Portnoy to just ask some brief questions of this witness, I think is what he asked.
Yes, do we have any objections to allowing that on the board?
Well, I guess what I would ask is, can I finish presenting the information about his experience, asked to qualify him as an expert, and be subject to cross-examination at that point in voir dire, but I think the only thing that was pending was whether this should be admitted into the record.
Yeah, and if Mr. Portnoy, if you were going to ask about this being admitted into the record, I mean, that's going to be up to the board, but are we waiting on this? Do you have an objection to this coming
I
in?
guess my position right now would be, we'd like to hear what his report says and then be able to ask questions about his affidavit specifically, perhaps, that may give us some more light. So if we could hold the admission of this until we have that opportunity just to hear what he says further, that would be mine.
We'd ask that it be admitted now, and then we'll provide the report and ask questions about it and qualify him as an expert.
Yeah, because the actual report won't come until the testimony section.
Yeah, I've got it right here, and I'm about to hand it to you.
All right, so I guess the question of the board is it okay if we proceed with the...
If you admit this document so I can hand it out to you.
And then allow them questions...
At the appropriate
At
time.
the appropriate time.
Yes.
Are we good with that?
Yes.
Everybody good?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, let's proceed that way then.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Finley, so your affidavit and resume has been
Thank you.
admitted into the record. This time, I'd ask that, I have a couple more questions. Have you reviewed the site plans and associated materials related to the proposed group development at issue in this appeal?
Yes, to the best of my knowledge, I reviewed all the latest and available information.
And you did perform an analysis of the impact that you believe the proposed development will have, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Based on your review of the proposed project, have you been able to form an opinion based on your professional experience and training on the likely impact of the development on traffic safety on Beaverbrook Road?
Yes, I have.
Were you able to form an opinion related to the impact from this might have on an increase in traffic crashes or other accidents?
Yes, I have.
And were you also able to look at whether adequate mitigation strategies had been provided?
Yes, I have.
Okay. At this point, I'd ask that Dr. Finley be qualified as an expert in the area of traffic engineering, and I'd ask that the board consider his testimony as that of an expert.
We'd like to object until we've had a chance to voir dire him on his methodology and how he reached his conclusions.
So now we have the chicken and the egg.
Well, if I may, Mr. Chair, it's not really a chicken and egg. The first thing you do is you qualify someone for an expert. Are they an expert and
Yeah.
can they talk on
Yeah.
this? Yes or no? And then we look at the analysis that they did and questions about that. So
Right.
I think this
Right.
is the threshold issue of, are they an expert?
Right.
If yes, then we go to what analysis did they do, and we move through it that way.
Okay. So what's your objection?
But, yeah, so if, Mr. Sward, I didn't see who raised an objection. If you've got some questions based on his qualifications to be qualified as an expert, now would be the time to ask. Mr. Chairman, would be allowed them.
So I actually don't have an objection to about his qualifications as an expert. To the extent that we're lumping this in with his affidavit that has his conclusions in it, I think it's important to be able to ask him about his methodology before that becomes part of the.
And Mr. Chair, I believe that goes to the analysis, which I'm going to ask him all the questions about what did you do and how did you do it and what method did you use and everything behind it. And I know there'll be a loud opportunity to cross-examine Mr. Finley to ask all the questions they want about that.
And are those in a separate exhibit, or is that included?
Yes, I'm about to hand it out to you.
Okay, so can we just separate these two, and then that alleviates the concern?
What I'm hearing is they don't have any objection to his
So-
qualification.
Right.
It would be fine with me to admit the resume, CV, all that stuff, but to kind of reserve ruling on the affidavit itself until the appropriate time. Because
Believe-
it does contain conclusions that are not those conclusions are not backed up in the affidavit itself. They are just stated as conclusions, and I think the appropriate time to admit that would be after we've had an opportunity to ask you about how we reached this conclusion. But as far as him being an expert, we have no objection. And to his materials, presently in CD, no objection.
And I want to clarify just for the record,
Yeah.
what Mr. Short said, he's correct. We have no objection for purposes of this hearing and based on the information we've heard, but obviously are reserving our right. We just want to clarify for the record, if this is something with the appeal, the right to conduct discovery in those appeals to challenge those at a later point.
So I think the board ruled on admitting 1.1 through 1.29. We've already done that. And I'm hearing no objection to the qualifications, and so again, I'll make my motion that he be accepted and qualified as an expert in the area of traffic engineering.
Yes.
I don't know that we accepted all of this in here. We brought from you for these folks first to read. Is that accurate? Have we?
Yeah, you've admitted Exhibit 1.1 through
Okay.
1.29.
Okay.
Right.
Subject to their objection that you've just heard. And then now Mr. Noor is, John, say it again.
I'm asking that Dr. Finley be qualified as an expert in the area of traffic engineering.
Right.
Okay, do we need to make a motion to do this?
If you'd like to, or if you want to make a ruling by yourself, it can be appealed to the full board.
Okay, do we have any objections to this person being qualified as an expert?
In traffic engineering.
Traffic engineering. Hearing none, hearing no objections, then we approve him being qualified as a traffic engineer.
Okay.
Okay.
And John, if I can just ask you, are you going to spend a significant amount of time on his report for standing purposes?
For standing purposes only, because I think it's the only purposes that his testimony is being
Right,
offered for.
right.
Perfect, okay.
Special damage is the standing qualification.
For her standing.
Her standing, yeah.
Yes. So, Mr. Finley, I've got an exhibit, and I'm going to show it here. It's marked as Exhibit 2.1. I know you can also, I'm trying to figure out where the camera. There we go. This right here. Can you identify that document for me, Dr. Finley?
Yes, that's a document that describes the analysis and findings that we performed for this case.
Okay. This is the development impact analysis that you performed, correct?
That's correct.
And I'm not yet going to ask that it be admitted into evidence, but we are going to ask you questions about it to lay the foundation for that to occur. So in that analysis, yes, yeah.
I'm keeping Madam Court reporters.
Oh, you are?
Yes.
And then this would be for your board members.
Yeah.
I think so. Make sure I count it. Okay, Dr. Finley, I think you identified 2.1 as the analysis that you performed. Can you talk about the site visit and the data you collected and relied upon as part of your review?
Yes, during the site visit, I drove up and down the road 2 different times and also walked up and down the road to have a good perspective of the roadway width, the curvature of the road, its proximity to other properties in relation to the development. Those were in addition to taking measurements and photographs of the location.
Okay. You mentioned you took photographs, measurements, things like that as well?
That's correct.
And within your industry, are these sort of facts and data sufficient to perform the kind of analysis that you provided in this case?
Not on their own. I think it's a very important input, but we use other established methods and techniques that are used, including data sources such as ITE that we mentioned previously, the Highway Safety Manual, the Federal Highway Administration's Crash Modification Clearinghouse, and some other resources as well. So it's important to have the local input, look for the site characteristics, and then use established methods for expanding those impacts.
Those other data sources that you mentioned, are those commonly used in the transportation engineering field in order to do this kind of analysis?
Yes, and actually they're required references for the professional engineering exam for traffic engineering. So they are established not only by the profession, but also by the testing agency for professional engineers.
So essentially, you have local data that you collected, and you also have broader data that you use that's assembled from sources across the country and is a required component to do the analysis. It's the analysis that you performed.
That's correct.
Okay. Did you, when your visit, did you independently investigate and collect the information that you used here?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. We took our own measurements, made our own observations, and didn't rely on any hearsay or suggestions.
And where I'm getting at is you didn't just talk to nearby property owners and take their word for it and just pop that into an analysis. That's not the kind of work that you did.
That's correct. We did not do that.
And what other data, I think one of the board members has a question.
Yeah, I had a question. You said we and you said our. I just wanted to clarify, who do you do this work with when you do the site visit and the qualification? It's not just yourself?
Yes, thank you for that, asking that question. I work with a colleague, Chris Cunningham. His signature is also on the exhibit, and as well as his being a registered professional engineer. We do work as a team, and I think that makes our analysis much more robust, having two engineers reviewing it instead of just one.
Okay, thank you.
But I'm familiar with and was engaged in all of the analysis and findings that are included in this exhibit.
And as a clarifying question there, so another way of saying that is everything that's in this report you personally participated in and can testify to based on your own personal knowledge and expertise, correct?
That is correct, and that's standard in the engineering profession, is that there'll be multiple individuals engaged, and I'm representing that work and I'm deeply familiar with all of it.
Okay. When you performed your analysis, did you use talk about the principles and methods that you have used. I've got a couple questions about that. Where did you get the analysis process and techniques that you used in this particular case?
Fortunately, I learned a lot of this through my engagement in the textbooks that I mentioned. The IT Traffic Engineering Handbook is fundamental in our profession for guiding a lot of that standard procedures and practices. We use the Federal Highway Administration's Highway Safety Manual, in particular looking at expected safety performance, and also their crash modification factors clearinghouse, which is a common resource for doing safety analysis. There's also the AASHTO, which is the American Association for State Highway and Transportation Officials. That's why they go by AASHTO, long name. And their document is known as the Green Book. It's a policy on the geometric design of highways and streets. And use that information as well, looking at the sharpness of curves and vehicle size and how those interact and interplay with each other, as well as the longitudinal grade, which is the steepness of the road. So we look how all those factors interplay for the geometric design of the road.
So for a non-engineer, I'll just say that all kind of comes together, and I'm not sure what that means sometimes, but would it be fair to say that your techniques and methods you pulled from treatises within the industry, you didn't just create this as a one-off?
That's correct. This would be the same resources that any engineer would be referring to complete this type of analysis.
And the same techniques that are commonly used to do this kind of analysis within the industry, correct?
Yes. These methods are well established.
Okay. Just a couple more questions about your methodology. Has this I assume from what I'm hearing from you, this technique and the analysis process you've used has been tested before?
Yes. Many of these manuals have been around for a long time and are used in most similar types of analysis would use those references.
And your processes have been subject to peer review in that the analysis that you went through, others have looked at, other engineers have evaluated, it's reliable based on that kind of review?
Yes, and I mentioned some of my peer-reviewed journal article publishing history, and some of these same techniques were used in those published articles, as well as for me personally, my thesis was on the safety performance of horizontal curves, and so that's a turn to the left or the right, which is especially prominent in mountainous locations, and so I'm very familiar with those practices, procedures, and the things that I've done in that area have been peer-reviewed.
Is there a known error rate as part of this? So a statistical way of assessing your conclusions?
Yes, we certainly have statistical methods to provide confidence levels in estimates that we make.
Okay. And I assume that the way you're talking about this has achieved general acceptance within the traffic engineering firm, field.
Yes, that is correct, that we rely on it and know these methods, processes, and error rates when we're conducting this type of analysis.
Okay. So enough about the data and what went in and the analysis and how you went about it. Let's sort of get to the core, the meat of this. But I ask all those questions so that the board understands what you considered and the way in which you applied it. So can you, based on the analysis, what conclusions were you able to reach about the traffic safety, and other likely impacts of the proposed group development?
First and foremost, this development will generate substantial traffic volumes.
Daniel, just hold on one second. There's an objection.
I'm sorry, my understanding, I think you called this a group development. That's not here. That's an improper characterization.
What?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah, I'm sorry. There was a reference to group development, which is a very specific issue that we'll get to in the substance of the case. And the town and the landowner strongly dispute that characterization of this being a group development. So I just wanted to put that on the record, that characterizing the development as a group development is improper at this time.
Well,
When did
in
he say
response, we believe it is a group development. That's one of the arguments in this case. I don't know that that's a proper objection for anything.
Can we just call it development at this point?
Yeah, that's what we
Doesn't-
prefer.
We'll learn about it later. I mean, I don't know anything about the development yet, really, at this point.
I'm happy to, we'll refer to it as development. I
Is
don't
that okay
think
with you guys?
We're okay officially?
Yep, you can reserve your ruling on that objection under the condition that Mr. Noor says he's going to call it a development instead of a group development.
Any concerns with the terminology? Okay, let's proceed that way.
So, Mr. Finley, sort of working through your analysis and your report here, let's sort of start at the top. I asked you about the conclusions you were able to reach. Let's start with traffic volumes, okay? Talk to the board about what your conclusions were and how you reached those.
Oh, yeah.
Well, to sort of orient the board, I'll back up. We're going to talk about the conclusions, then we're going to go into exactly what the foundation for each of those conclusions are, so that you understand what his opinion is and how he got there. Okay. So, Daniel, can you talk through what your conclusions were on traffic volumes?
Yes, and please, if anyone has any follow-up questions, or if as a professor and a researcher, I may expand too far on some of these descriptions, and so if you find me providing too much detail, please let me know. So what we look for in this type of analysis is what's the type of development, and so we considered that in our analysis, and in particular using ITE's trip generation handbook. And based on the quantity and the intensity of that land use, we believe that this will generate substantial traffic volumes, particularly for the characteristics, the character of the roadway environment. So that's first and foremost. It's going to generate extra trips, and it will be noticeable, and it will be a substantial and significant impact.
What were your conclusions on safety issues?
In our safety analysis, we do believe that I believe that overall crashes will be expected to increase by a factor of 4.8, so almost a 5 times multiplier. So the likelihood of a crash would be 4.8 times greater given the increase in traffic volumes. And there are other things that are taken into consideration there, but building a model that incorporates the local characteristics of those roadways is how we generated that estimate of 4.8.
And what could you talk about the curve radii and the impact that this development has related to that, and what a curve radii is?
Yes, absolutely. So there's three components of a roadway that give it its overall shape. First is the vertical alignment, so it's up and down movement. This is a pretty consistent grade throughout this roadway. It's steep. It's not up and down. It's very much a consistent upgrade if you're heading uphill, and then a consistent downgrade if you're heading downgrade. So that's the first component. The second component I mentioned previously is the horizontal alignment. So that's the left to right curvature of the roadway. And the key way we describe horizontal alignment is through the radius of a curve. So a sharp radius curve will have a small number. So a 200-foot radius curve is a very tight, a very sharp curve, a very low-speed curve. Interstates will have much larger radius curves. So you may have a 2 or 3 or 4 or 5,000 foot radius curve on an interstate. And so that's how we describe and characterize horizontal curvature.
And,
the third
Daniel, let me just interrupt you for a second, because I want to make sure everybody's following along. Sometimes, again, we're not all engineers, and we appreciate that you are. In your conclusion here, what was your conclusion about the curve radii? When I hear you saying that, you're talking about sort of how tight a turn is, right? Mm-hmm. Is that correct?
That is correct. It's how tight a turn is.
Okay, and what conclusions did you reach about the curve radii involved in this case and its ability to accommodate construction vehicles?
And I want to speak specifically about one in particular, because each curve has its own characteristics, and we could get into other ones, but commonly we will focus on a choke point, or the most critical curve, because if it doesn't work there, then the other curves are irrelevant. So looking at the intersection of Beaverbrook Road and Beaverbrook Court, so this is very close to the development, very much on the very end of the roadway. This is a very tight radius curve. The radius is approximately 30 feet. So that is a very, very, very sharp curve, and it requires a 140-degree change in heading. So if you can imagine, you're heading uphill at a pretty steep grade, and this horizontal curve requires a 140-degree turn. So it's not quite turning all the way around with your back, but almost that way. So it's a very tight curve, and it's also long enough that you're really doing pretty much a U-shape, not quite a full U-shaped turn. And trucks require a larger turning radius than this. A single unit truck, so that's a truck that's kind of connected in one piece. That's not a tractor trailer. That's just a single unit truck, requires a 42-foot radius. So this curve is only a 30-foot radius. A single unit truck requires 42 feet. A WB, a smaller tractor trailer requires 40 feet. So you're in this 42 foot range for a minimum of a truck. So therefore, it's physically impossible for said trucks, single unit or a small wheelbase tractor trailer, to stay in their lane throughout that curve. Okay. The road isn't wide enough, the curve is too sharp for that vehicle to stay within its lane.
And it may be stating the obvious, but why does staying in your lane matter?
Yeah, good question. And in particular, when you're on a curve that's going to have sight distance issues, and what I mean by sight distance is, as you're driving on that roadway, can you see far enough in front of you to react to any hazard? So if there's a truck or a vehicle that stopped just past the curve, can you see past that curve in order to safely maneuver, either stop or take some other evasive maneuver? So that's why it is very important to stay in your lane as a fundamental part of traffic engineering. That's one of the main things we do, is how do we keep traffic separated from each other.
Okay. And we'll talk a little bit more about this, but again, let's move on to another one of your conclusions. What conclusions did you have about mitigation?
So in terms of the mitigation, unfortunately, I was unaware of any evidence that would show how these negative effects would be mitigated. The application didn't show how this would be mitigated, so I don't really have a good answer to you or to the council about how and whether or not mitigation efforts would mitigate these safety concerns.
So if I'm hearing you right, what you're essentially saying is you're not seeing anything in the application that shows how the increase in crash rate that you just talked about and the curve radii are addressed by this development. There's just nothing that shows you how that would be mitigated or dealt with.
That's correct. I've seen no evidence for that, and even I have concerns about the driveway entrance because there's not quite enough detail to do the same type of analysis that I mentioned at the curve that I described in more detail. But I also think just the entry point, the driveway to the development, is going to result in similar deficiencies because of the way the road is going, and the connection to the property is going to require a large change in heading. So it's going to be a sharp turn. It's going to be a long change in angle, and it's going to, in my opinion, it will result in similar deficiencies.
And are these conclusions made to a reasonable degree of engineering certainty?
Yes, they are.
And the reason I ask that is this is not just how you feel about it, right?
That's correct, yes. These are numbers. We made the measurements. We know how sharp a truck can turn. We can measure the radius of the curve, and that's how that's what we based our opinions on. My opinion.
I think in the second page of your report, you talk about conclusions related to ingress and egress. What were your conclusions there?
I want to make sure I'm referring to the same.
And I'm referring to that first paragraph on the second page there that starts with, in its current state, the project will.
So yes, the information we currently have on the development and any mitigation measures which are lacking, I've seen no evidence that there are measures to provide ingress and egress in such a way that minimizes traffic congestion on these streets and also provides safe passage for the traveling public.
And it is your professional opinion that this will adversely impact the health and safety of persons residing and working in the neighborhood of the proposed development, including the Bernsteins? I am sorry. That was way too fast. I'm just reading the last sentence there. Your professional opinion is that the proposed development will adversely impact the health and safety of persons residing and working in the neighborhood of the proposed development due to the above discussed and conclusions, correct?
That is correct, and we go on to say in our memo that there's a high impact area, so it is a smaller group of properties that will have special damages that will have a more extreme impact from this development.
And that smaller group includes the Bernsteins, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
They are actually, their current access point is in between the driveway of the development and the sharp curve that I mentioned previously.
Okay. Can you describe for the board what the significance of the map on page 3 of your report is?
Yes, so this is a map. I want to make sure I'm talking about the same one.
This is the one that has proposed development in the middle of it and is under overview of existing traffic volumes.
So a couple of things we're looking for here is one, who is maintaining these roads, who's responsible for these roads, who will be there as roads deteriorate to fix them, to improve them, to maintain them. And so one of the things I wanted to show here was that these are privately owned and maintained roads. We can see in the second image that no NCDOT-owned roads are even near this road, so there is a maintenance agreement that we have seen between a number of the property owners that does exist for Beaver Brook Road.
So stated another way, these aren't public roads that the city or DOT comes in and maintains and paves, et cetera. This falls on the responsibility of the neighbors to do.
Right.
That's correct. That's correct.
And I think you also referenced the DOT map on page 4 of your report. That's just showing where the proposed development is in relationship to the closest publicly maintained roads?
That is correct, yes.
Moving on into the trip generation, I think you mentioned that earlier. Can you talk to the board about how you calculated the increase in traffic volume that you just testified to?
Yes, and this is where the Institute of Transportation Engineers document, the Trip Generation Handbook, comes into play. And the two things we really need to know is what's the type of development, and this is a residential development. We did see two values in the submitted documents, one that has a maximum total of 128 permitted units, and one with 110 proposed multifamily units. The 128 permitted units is expected to generate 930 trips per day. 110 units would be 800 trips per day. And under both of those scenarios, we come to the same conclusion. So it doesn't matter if we consider the 128 or the 110. The conclusions are the same here. I think it's probably worth mentioning the term I use, unadjusted trips, and this is standard methodology that you will start with a baseline of trips, and we'll call these unadjusted trips that we get from the Trip Generation Manual. And we can adjust those in two ways. One is by a pass-by trip. And so if you, a land use type like a gas station will typically have a lot of pass-by trips. You're driving by, you look at your fuel gauge, you're low, you're going to pull in and fill up and then turn back out. So that type of trip doesn't generate the same impact as when you're driving specifically for a destination. A residential unit does not have pass-by trips, so we would assume 0 pass-by trips for this type of development. And similarly, internal capture is another way that you can adjust those trips counts, particularly down. And what you would need for there is a mix of land uses. So if, for instance, if a development has residential and a coffee shop and a restaurant and a grocery store, it wouldn't be fully added of all those trips because some of the people who live there will also eat at the restaurant or buy coffee or buy groceries. This only has one land use type, so there are no internal capture. And so our final value that we use is the 800 trips per day for the 110 unit scenario or the 930 trips for the 128 units. Sorry if I went into too much detail there.
No, but I'll pause to see if the board members have any questions about how you came up with that trip generation.
No.
I'm good. Moving on to your site distances, can you talk about, and I believe sort of orienting you, Daniel, your site distances conclusion. This is on the next page, I think page 5, or page 6, actually. Can you talk to the board about how you came to the conclusions related to site distances and what that means in this context?
So absolutely, when we're looking at site distance, what we're trying for, what the goal and the standard you want to reach is that when you're looking in front of you, that you can safely stop or react to any hazard. Horizontal curvature adds a lot of site distance concerns because if you think about a sharp curve, when you have that sharp curve, you're likely going to have obstructions within the inside of those sharp curves, particularly at the intersection locations where you need to see turning vehicles. And there are multiple elements and instances where site distance will play a role in the safety performance of those segments of the road.
And what were your conclusions about the impact that this would have, the site distance concerns?
This is a conservative estimate because there is not a lot of robust data on smaller residential mountainous streets. So, in my opinion, this impact will actually be larger than what we've provided a conservative estimate here. In particular, focusing on the severe curve at Beaverbrook Road and Beaverbrook Court would have an increase in crashes of 10% just at that location because of those site distance issues.
Looking at the curve radii, can you talk to the board we talked a little bit about that, but how you formed your conclusions about the curve? Yeah, there's a question from one of the board.
So what's the baseline in terms of the number of accidents currently? May have already been stated, but I'm not remembering.
Currently?
Daniel, the question was about the baseline for crashes. How are you measuring background that's existing as of today compared to what you expect to occur when the development would come online? Did I say that correctly?
Were there any other clarifications to the question?
No other clarification.
Okay. Okay, great. So there's two ways that we can look at crash performance, and we actually look at it from both these perspectives and provide input and details on each of these. So we can estimate crashes using the Highway Safety Manual. So we can input the characteristics of a road and come up with an estimate of what the number of crashes that may result from that. We can also use the Federal Highway Administration's Crash Modification Factor Clearinghouse, which I know is a mouthful, and look to see what impact various characteristics will have. And so if we have a CMF, this is a multiplicative factor that adjusts the number of crashes you would expect. So a number larger than 1 is going to increase the crashes you would expect. A number less than 1 will decrease the number of crashes. So for instance, you may have a road that you want to widen the lane width on. We're going to estimate that you're going to decrease crashes from that. Conversely, if you want to create more lanes and so each lane gets more narrow, we're going to have a crash modification factor larger than 1, meaning we're expecting more crashes. So we did look at it from both those perspectives, both from a estimate of the crashes we would expect as a frequency of crashes, and then also look at these characteristics and relationships that would be a multiplicative factor on those types of crashes.
And I believe your number was 1.10 on the previous slide, and that would indicate that's where you have the 10% that you were referring to?
That's correct, and that just relates to the sight distance concern at that particular location.
And that's just sight distance, not cumulatively, but just sight distance.
That is correct.
Okay, so different concerns yield different additional risks based on the particular issue, correct?
That is correct.
And there's a question from Ms. Gosnell as well.
Is this already a high crash area where
I will let
this
Daniel.
intersection?
There are difficulties with crashes because one of the things we rely, the main source of crash data are police reports, law enforcement reports. On local roads, they can go underreported. Oftentimes it may go directly to your insurance and maybe fixed on its own. So sometimes there's a gap in data there. The volume also is extremely important. If we think about this as a single-family home development, and so thinking about a driveway, all of us, you may have a long driveway that with 1 or 2 vehicles in the household is fine, but as you add more and more traffic to it, those adverse conditions and characteristics are going to lead to more conflicts. You're going to have more instances where there's the chance to have crashes. And so we usually see an exponential curve where as you add volumes at low volumes, as you add extra vehicles at low volumes, you're not going to see a big ramp up in crashes. But as you add more vehicles on roads that don't have ideal characteristics, you're going to see an increase in a faster increase in collisions for those characteristics.
Does that get to your question, Ms. Gosnell?
Did that?
She's nodding, Daniel. Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry. Yes.
So we talked about sight distances, curve radii. Can you talk the board through how you developed that conclusion as well?
Fortunately, this was a topic that I know very well because it's my dissertation. I published 5 or 6 journal articles on measuring horizontal curves. So I would say I'm one of probably the leading experts in measuring and identifying horizontal curves. And so this used a very standard engineering equation to measure the curve, and then we also have very standard dimensions for trucks. And so it's just a simple comparison of the radius and the turning radius of trucks to come to those conclusions.
And your conclusion there was that, and I just want to emphasize, it is physically impossible for a truck to complete this turn movement while staying in their lane, making it substantively unsafe. Is that a correct reading of your conclusion?
That is correct. That is correct.
Let's talk about grade next. What conclusions did you have about grade? And maybe we start with what grade is.
Yes.
So we all have a shared understanding of that term.
And fortunately, I think most of the audience in the room will be familiar with what we'll call what's actually referred to as longitudinal grade. I'll shorten that technical term to just be grade, but longitudinal means it's along the axis as you're moving along the roadway, which differs from the cross slope of the grade. So you can have cross slope that as you're driving the road is sloped to the left or the right, but now we're talking kind of forward and reverse in your vehicle. And again, longitudinal grade is what we're focusing on here. This is represented usually by a percent. So if you had a 5% grade, for instance, that means every 100 feet you move forward, you're going to go up in 5 feet. This road, on average, Beaverbrook Road, has a grade of 17%. So meaning every 100 feet you go, you're going to go up 17 feet. As a comparison, hopefully this is another reference that many of you are familiar with, I-40 on Old Fort Mountain has a grade of approximately 6%, which is very steep for an interstate. There's also multiple truck runaway ramps. There's an extra climbing and descent lane for trucks so they can go slowly. 17% is very steep, almost 3 times what Old Fort Mountain is, and that's on average. There are points where it is more steep than that.
And I've thrown up on the screen.
I'd just like to note an objection in the interest of time. We're objecting to this continued presentation of evidence, which I believe goes far beyond what is required for standing. And I would like the board to rule on that objection. And we do have some context questions to ask this witness, but I wanted to note and have the board rule on my objection as to time and the fact that this evidence is beyond what is needed for standing. Board's question.
If I may.
I have a question, but you're still objecting to standing?
We have a few contextual questions to provide context to this report that we would like to ask the engineer, but I don't think we need to go through his methodology in excruciating detail for interest of standing. And we're risking getting beyond standing for this presentation and into other things that the subject is.
Okay, I understand what you're asking.
If I may, Mr. Chairman and board members, so all of this goes to standing. Special damages is one of the hallmarks for standing here. What this witness is talking to is the assessment that he did to determine whether special damages are present as a result of this development, how he came to that conclusion, the data that he used, and the analysis that goes into them. We have to present that to you all in order for you all to conclude that the Bernsteins and CRLU have standing. Additionally, and you've heard this from the lawyers before, this is for another judge who might review your decision to understand how you made your decision. So we need this in the record in order for this to be, on review, upheld whatever decision you would make about the evidence and the conclusions related to standing. And so I don't think this has anything to do with this is not dealing with the underlying merits of the appeal, which are a review of the zoning determinations that Ms. Tuck made, but they have everything to do with special damages. And so it has to be allowed to finish up. We're close to the end with Mr. Finley, but I think we need to put this on. We're required to.
Okay.
So I just want to note again, and I came up to the podium to be close to the mic because someone reminded me to do that. We are not contesting standing for purpose of this hearing. We are reserving our right to contest it if this goes to court. For purposes of this witness's testimony and his expert report and all of that, I presume that this report will be entered into the record. Everything that he is testifying to now is in the report. We don't really need to hear it right now. We would like the chance to ask some questions to add context to what's in the report, but at this point, I don't think we're even going to object to inclusion of this report in the record. So again, there are many issues in this case. We've blocked off a lot of time for this hearing, but we need to start getting to the issues instead of dwelling on this engineer's methodology, which, by the way, this is the first time we've seen any of this. We would have to have our own expert here if we wanted to rebut the conclusions on methodology and things like that. So there's not even anything we can say right now. We reserve the right to supplement the record later with our own expert testimony. But that's not today. That would be in court if we ever get there. So again, I would just ask the court to rule my objection as to, you know, endless presentation of, you know, the methodology behind this report.
So what are you
What do
technically
you think?
objecting? I mean, in a,
I'm objecting
Trying
to
to-
the
To shorten
continued
this.
presentation of this evidence, which is taking up a lot of time. And
so you're willing to accept standing from this witness?
We're willing to accept
Right.
that this report that we're talking about here can go into the record, but we would like a chance to ask our own questions about, basically about the information that went into this report. That's all.
What about standing?
I think that's, you hit it right there on the head. I mean,
Well-
we've got to present our evidence on standing. It needs to be in the record. A judge
Yeah.
may look at it later on. That's what we've got to do. That's what we're doing through this witness. And essentially, they're just saying, well, we don't want y'all to hear any more about this because we want to talk about something else. I will move along quickly, but I
We've got to
need to put this
establish
evidence in the
standing
record.
first.
And once again, this evidence will be in the record because it's in the report. We will not object to inclusion of the report. We would ask just for an opportunity to ask a few questions about the information he took into account in this report, but we are not going to today say that their traffic evidence is inadequate to show standing.
The key there is today. Well, and that's why I need to present everything now so that it's in the record for tomorrow when they do, and I don't mean literally tomorrow, I mean
Literally.
in front of a judge
tomorrow.
when they'll come in and say, oh, no, he didn't do everything he should have done.
And so, yes, as a preliminary matter, Mr. North, your client is
Yes,
done
Ms.
being
Bernstein,
the
I'm sorry, we
witness.
left you up there on the end, and we probably should move you back down because you're no longer testifying.
It's a cushioned seat, though.
And so we, yes, we do have an objection raised by Mr. Sward, and we're still not standing. And I'm not indicating one way or the other to rule. Mr. Noor is putting on his case for standing, whether it is just mere allegations of credible evidence, or if it is all of the credible allegations of standing or damages to the individual party seeking standing. That's Mr. Noor's way to put it on. And so this board, the objection is, do you continue to hear Mr. Noor's presentation of his evidence as it relates to standing? This is not the underlying issue at all. It's just the standing. If the board wants to hear the continued presentation of the evidence, it would overrule the objection. If the board has deemed sufficient evidence presented to show damage as it relates to traffic and wants Mr. Noor to cut it short, you would sustain that objection.
Is there any discussion here?
You all can have discussion.
Open discussion.
Open discussion, yes.
So we'll start from one end and go down. So do you think you've heard enough on the traffic issue?
I'd like to let
Mr. Noor.
Mr. Nord continue and finish. He said it will be fairly quick and brief. I do believe it is in our best interest to understand all of the pieces and put our judgment about standing based on that.
Okay. Any differences of opinion?
I completely agree. I would add, I understand you're saying we could admit the full report into evidence and just stop the presentation, but I think it's valuable to actually see a presentation of a report as opposed to read a report independently. So I would agree, we should continue, especially
Let him
since
finish.
this is an important matter to establish standing for the
So-
one person we're.
So to deny the objection would be to sustain the objection. I'll make sure we're.
No,
Overrule.
Overrule the objection.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
And for this board's purposes, Mr. Sward has said he just wants the opportunity to ask questions. He'll absolutely have the opportunity to ask any of those questions
Absolutely.
as it relates to what he testified to and the information contained in the report and any of the other methodologies.
Right.
Okay.
Does it require a vote from the board, or can the chair?
The chair can rule on it. If someone wants to appeal that to the full board after the discussion, that's fine.
Okay, so does anyone on the board have objections to overruling the?
No.
No, you can speak on our behalf, do it, go ahead.
Okay, so then the board is going to overrule the objection.
Okay, Dr. Finley, and just to reorient everyone, we left off with the grade issue, and I think you're referring to the, essentially that pass that goes from Old Fort up into Buncombe County, and you were talking about that. as being a 6% grade, and then you were also discussing that this was 17% and roughly 3 times that. I threw up here, and I believe it's on page 7 of your report, a graph. Can you explain this graph, this depiction here, to the board so they can understand what that is?
Yes, that was just my attempt to help us compare the slope, average slope of I-40 Old Fort Mountain at 6% and roughly the 17% slope on Beaver Brook Road. And this relates back to the safety. When you look at the grade of a roadway, we would expect this grade of 17% on its own to result in a crash modification factor of 1.27, representing a 27% increase in crashes. So if you take a flat road and put it at 17%, we're going to expect to see 27% more crashes on that roadway.
Okay, so
and if I can characterize generally, so when we talked about the radius, that was horizontal curvature, horizontal alignment. The grade is vertical alignment. So those are two big components just to keep us oriented on what they relate to.
Okay. Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
So, just a question, is this turn in question on this grade? So my understanding is you're going to be going uphill, we'll say, and you're going to turn on this grade and start coming downhill? Is that correct? Or am I misunderstanding where this turn is?
I don't think so.
Daniel, did you hear that?
The turn is, the curve is near the top, and that's why I wanted to bring it back to that point, because each of these three components make up the three-dimensional shape of the roadway. So the longitudinal grade is very consistent upgrade. I mean, it's on average 17%. It changes. You can see a little bit of changes from 17% on that the solid blue line, but it's consistent. When you reach the bottom of Beaver Brook Road, you're going to go uphill the whole way. There's no kind of going back down or any of this. It's just a consistent 17%, roughly 17% upgrade, and then on the way down at 17% downgrade. So we would call it a vertical curve when you go up and down. There's no vertical curvature. It's just consistent vertical alignment up or down Beaver Brook Road.
Mr. Chairman, is that
The horizontal, and then the horizontal component is the left and right turning. So even though there's no curvature on the longitudinal grade,
Right.
while you're going up that grade, your car is going left or right.
Okay.
Still going uphill, but going through horizontal curves. Those are the two components we've talked about so far.
So I'm still a little confused here. I mean, because I haven't seen drawings. This is
Let me ask maybe I can ask some question to get to what you're trying to ask. What I heard was, is it uphill the entire way, or do you get up and then kind of come back down again? Is that what you were asking, or
So
something?
are you going up and then getting in this bad curve and coming back down? So is the curve changing? Because you said it's almost a 180. I know it's not 180, but it's almost
Daniel,
180.
I think the chairman is asking, when you are heading uphill and you hit the curve, do you continue to hit the curve and go uphill, or do you hit the curve and go downhill? Can you clarify that for me?
Good answer.
You continue to go uphill, and figure 3, a couple pages past where we are, shows the curve in question. You can see Beaver Brook Road is kind of the U that forms each edge of the picture, and then there's a private driveway actually that's in the middle of that curve, and then also Beaver Brook Court is kind of behind the perspective of this picture. So it is a 4-leg intersection here. It is about as complicated as you can design a 4-leg intersection, because there's the 17% upgrade on Beaver Brook Road. There's sight distance issues embedded within here, and it's a sharp horizontal curve. So there's a lot going on here. I love the question. I'm glad we can continue to look at that. But you can see the road from a vertical perspective continues to go upgrade through the curve, and then the horizontal component is the sharpness of that curve.
And I've thrown that figure 3 up on the screen for the board's benefit there, Daniel, so that they can see what we're
Okay.
talking about.
Thank you. Thank you.
We'll go back for just a second. We were talking about the grade there. I think we got through that. And again, sort of to summarize, the sight distance added a 10% increase in crashes. The curve radii, you talked about how it's just physically impossible for the truck to complete that curve while staying in its lane. And then the grade, you indicated, would result in a 27% increase in crashes related to the grade. We looked at the grade diagram. Talk about road width.
And this is the third component. So I want to talk at this high level first so that we are oriented to what makes up a road. So we've got, again, horizontal, this is your left to right turning. Your vertical is your up and down. And then your roadway width makes the third component, which is your cross-section. All cross-section means is what makes up the width of the road. So typically you have lanes, you've got shoulders. If it's a road where there's a sidewalk, there may be a sidewalk, there may be a ditch. All those things make up your cross-section of the road. In particular, what I focused on here was the width and the shoulders. On average, there's an 18-foot wide section of pavement. That's for both directions. That's pretty narrow, 9 feet in each direction. There's no striping on the roadway, so you're not going to see that delineation of the two lanes. I did also identify a minimum pavement width of approximately 16 feet near the address 28 Beaverbrook Road. And so if you can imagine, particularly thinking about a truck passing a passenger vehicle, passenger vehicles are on the order of 7 feet wide. Trucks can be 8 to 10 feet wide. There's not much space to fit passing vehicles on some of those minimum areas. And on many areas, there are curbs on the roadway helping channel the water that falls on the roadway, and there's no shoulder beyond those curbs. So if you go and see the roadway, there'll be a curb and then a pretty quick drop off to really what is a ditch or an embankment at that point. And so with those reductions in the roadway width and shoulder width, depending on whether we're using 16 or 18 feet, is a crash modification of 1.18 and 1.22. So that's an increase of 18 and 22% in crashes. And the reason why I wanted to frame this in the 3 different dimensions of the road is because this road has challenges in each of those 3 dimensions. It's got horizontal curve issues. It's a sharp curve. This one in particular, there are others. Vertically, you've got a very steep grade that's going to limit the performance of vehicles, in particularly trucks. And then also in your cross section, that third dimension that makes it 3 dimensions, you've got issues on the roadway width and shoulders. So all 3 of those primary components that make up what we call the geometric design of the roadway are suboptimal.
Let's talk about sort of how you put all that together. And I've thrown up, and this is on page 8 of your report. Can you explain to the board what that expected crash rate, how you've assembled all of that to come to your final conclusion there?
Yes, Mr. Noor, I think you were alluding to that previously. We can combine those crash modification factors, the CMF. We have a CMF for sight distance, grade, width, and shoulder. We have a base crash rate. This is the number of crashes we would expect per mile per year based on the number of trips per day. So all of these things are related as we went through in the kind of the summary. How many trips are there? So what's the traffic volume on the roadway? 245 is the estimate for the current configuration, the current land use. 1,170 after you add in the proposed development. We come up with a base crash rate given those traffic volumes, and then we modify it based on those CMFs to arrive at those expected crash rates. In the current configuration, 0.15 crashes per mile per year. In the proposed development scenario, 0.71 crashes per mile per year. And so that's a difference of approximately 4.8 times the number of reportable crashes that you would expect, given the traffic volumes, given the geometric configuration, and given the highway safety manual assumptions and crash modification factors.
Okay. Let's move on to pavement maintenance. You'd mentioned that earlier. I've blown up. Can you talk about that maintenance? And we'll show those photos that are a part of your report so that the board can understand. I've thrown up figure 3. I think you'd already indicated this is essentially showing how the 4 roads come together currently, correct?
Yes, and throughout Beaverbrook Road, there's evidence of substantial pavement cracking and distress. So that's essentially indicative of the pavement reaching the end of its useful life. Can notice in this photo, if you look closely, there are targeted patches of pavement where there have been repairs. From information I've been told by others, those targeted patches were the result of single-family home development that happened on Beaverbrook Court, and that there was damage there at specific failure points, and those patches addressed those failures.
I'm going to direct you just to a couple other things. Some of the other photos you have here, this would be on page 12 of your report when you're looking at Beaverbrook Road. Is this some of the cracking you're referring to here at the base of Beaverbrook Road? This would be the picture that is above view of intersection of Beaverbrook Road with Beaverbrook Court.
Yes, and you can see multiple different types of pavement distress, alligator cracking, and cracking related to the shoulder or lane support. But certainly multiple types of distress and substantial distress to the pavement.
And again, these are private roads, so the ability to correct this falls on the neighbors to do that, correct?
That is correct. This is not, I have no evidence that any government agency is responsible for maintaining or improving this roadway.
And I think just maybe one or two more questions and then I will be complete. Just give me a second here.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, of course.
I'm kind of troubled. That road, Beaverbrook Road going up that hill, it doesn't look like it's very wide. How wide is that road? It doesn't even look like 16 feet wide. It barely looks like a driveway, like one car can go up that road.
Dr. Finley, did you hear the question?
Yes. So I did not I didn't measure every single foot of the road, but I didn't identify anything that looked smaller than 16 feet upon measurement. One of the things that's a little bit misleading in some of these photos is there are leaves on the roadway, and so if you look at the delivery vehicle, you see a FedEx truck below the one, Mr. Noor, that you pointed out. I think this gives a good example of how wide one vehicle is and how much of that road space it does take up. You can notice there's about a foot of leaves on each side, so the road is not as narrow as just what you can see for the black asphalt pavement of the road. It goes a little bit further, but it is a narrow road. Most prudent drivers are going to feel a little uncomfortable, especially passing a vehicle. I think many drivers would probably come to a complete stop and look for the widest place they can to do this, if you have enough sight distance to see that there is another vehicle coming. And I think that's the most substantial concern, is where that may happen.
And a question follow-up there. When they come to a sudden stop, what impact does that have on traffic safety, particularly if one vehicle is heading up a 17% grade and another vehicle might be heading down and in relation to inclement weather? Excuse me.
Yes, absolutely. Adverse pavement condition really is going to play a role in here, both the quality of the pavement itself, but also if there's any issues with the friction that could be rain or, as you mentioned, Mr. Noor, snow or ice that can accumulate. And what you may run the risk of for a crash is actually secondary crashes. So that first vehicle that approaches another vehicle to pass, they may be able to stop, but the secondary vehicle approaching from the rear may not see them in time, may not be able to react in the same way, and it may lead to a secondary crash in that type of situation.
And for clarity, this is the entire area in front of Mr. and Mrs. Bernstein's home that you're referring to. This is that section of Beaverbrook Road, correct?
That's correct. That's where the focus of our analysis really is in that high impact area. The closer you get to kind of down the mountain, those characteristics change. So thanks for clarifying, I am speaking specifically about that higher impact area that's closer to the access point to the development.
And that probably leads me to my last question. How are these issues special? And I forgive me, Ms. Gosnell, you raised.
It's okay. You can finish that, and then I can ask.
Okay. How are these issues special and distinct for the Bernsteins compared to the community at large?
It's essentially their proximity to the property. Most individuals will have no purpose or no reason to drive to the terminus of Beaverbrook Road. Those areas, those properties in that high impact area are specifically there because to reach their property, and particularly the Bernsteins as an example, they have to go through this most hazardous curve, the steepest slopes, the narrowest widths. And so that's why I did specifically call this out as a high impact area. And there are several photos in there that specifically touch on segments of roadway that are near these properties and in the high impact area.
And in that high impact area, essentially another way of saying is, those are the properties, and this is on page 11, those are the properties that your conclusions relate to, specifically the Bernsteins and 4 others, not everybody in the neighborhood, correct?
That's correct. Some of the properties, I didn't evaluate other properties, so I can't really speak to them, but they are not going to have the same adverse effects as these high impact areas. Again, the high impact area has all 3 of those adverse conditions in the vertical perspective, the horizontal perspective, and in the cross-section perspective.
So in your professional opinion, these, the safety issues, your other conclusions, these are special and distinct damages that the Bernsteins and the other 5 properties right along Beaverbrook Road would suffer, distinct from the community at large?
Yes, that's correct.
This time I'd ask that the report and analysis marked as Exhibit 2.1 through 2.18 be admitted.
Okay, did you have a question?
I was just curious what the speed limit is on this road.
Did you hear Ms.
Yeah,
Gosnell's
is there a
question,
speed limit?
Dr. Finley?
I did not. Can you repeat it?
What is the speed limit on this road?
There, from my knowledge, is no posted speed on this section. So I would need to check for, statutorily it's probably 25 miles per hour, but that's something I would have to look into and get back to you. The speed limit was not a huge factor in our analysis.
I have another question.
We really looked at the geometric components.
There is one more question
Yeah.
by Ms. Hoffman.
By any chance, do you know the elevation of the road we're talking about by the Bernstein's house? Is it above 3,500 feet?
It is not. It's roughly 2,300 feet to 2,600 feet. The Bernsteins would be on the top end of that, so I
Okay,
expect the property would be around 2,600 feet.
okay, just curious.
Is that indicated in the graph you provided on the 7th page here that shows that elevation change over the course of the road?
Okay,
That is correct. The slope of I-40 Old Fort Mountain is only the slope. It is not representing the elevation on I-40. So the elevation relates to Beaverbrook Road, not I-40.
right, okay.
That leads me to, one follow-up question. So this higher elevation, from a traffic engineering standpoint, do you expect more inclement weather from a snow and icing type standpoint at the top of a mountain versus at the base of a mountain going to the top?
Yes, it is a complex relationship, north side of the mountain, south side of the mountain, so there are multiple things to take into consideration. I didn't look explicitly at all the weather patterns, but it is certainly something that should be considered.
Okay.
We just asked that the report be admitted into the record.
Again, we'd like to ask questions before the board admits this into the record.
Okay, I want to take a break, so we finish up this whole.
Yeah, well, we should probably finish up Dr. Findley before we
That's
take a
okay,
break.
fine. Okay,
Yeah.
yes, proceed, please.
Give me 1 second.
When this person is done, we'll take a 15-minute break. I can do that.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
you can do anything you want.
Don't know anymore. Just to make everybody happy.
So, Dr. Finley, we just have a few questions, and I want to point out that, we're limited tonight by the fact that we were not provided this in advance, so we are reserving the right to challenge us on other grounds, including grounds that would require us to have expert testimony. But for the boards, to provide context as much as anything else, I just have a couple of questions about the information that was taken into account as part of this. In other words, this is not about whether his methodologies are accurate or proven, or whether you know, his conclusions are sound based on what he's presented. It is really, we want to point out that the information that went into this requires some explanation. So, Dr. Finley, you reviewed the site plan that's part of this application, correct?
That is correct.
And these photos of the roads in your report, are those on the site of this development?
I have my analysis focused on the roadway infrastructure, so I had no reason, and there are no photos inside or within the development itself.
So these photographs show roads that are not part of the development site,
Right.
as shown in the application. Is that correct?
The closest one to the development site is on it's the second last page of photos that says view of Beaverbrook Road near the entrance of the proposed development. So that is very close to where the driveway will be accessing the property. But this Beaverbrook Road is the only way to access this property currently. There's no other roadway network that connects to this development.
Did your work look into the ownership of the road and specifically the photo that's up on the screen now, which is Exhibit 2, page 13? Did your work look into the ownership of the land under that road?
No, we looked at the maintenance agreement and that no government agency has a requirement or ownership of the road.
Did your work look into whether there are any plans to improve Beaverbrook Road alongside this development?
We did, but because it's not owned or maintained by any government agencies, typically a road project that's publicly owned and maintained would be in a long-term capital plan. This doesn't exist for this roadway. We also saw no evidence. I was provided with no evidence that there would be improvements or mitigation measures for Beaverbrook Road.
Did you ask the developer whether there were any plans to improve Beaverbrook Road or make any other improvements?
I did not ask the developer.
If there were plans to improve these roads depicted in your report, would information about those improvements be relevant to your analysis?
Yes. So if the character of the road, if the road is reconstructed or rebuilt, that certainly impacts our estimate of the safety performance. So that is something we have to consider. But again, we've seen no evidence or plans that suggest that would happen.
So, looking at your report, is it a fair characterization to say that all of your conclusions are based on the existing characteristics of these roads?
Right.
Yes, it's the existing characteristics of the road and the information that was provided in the development plans, which do not speak to improvements that would be made on Beaverbrook Road.
So if you were provided new information about improvements to Beaverbrook Road, do you think that might change your conclusions?
I think there's a lot of hypotheticals in there. I'd need to know the specific characteristics. I would say that I would look at those characteristics and could do similar analysis that would change the characteristics, change those assumptions, change our results potentially in the analysis, but without knowing those specific numbers, I couldn't say that just doing something may fix or mitigate those issues.
So, but you would need to know what exactly was proposed before you could reach any conclusions on what might help and what might not.
That's correct, yes.
But there are things that could be proposed that could improve on what you're showing in your report. Is that correct? Is that a fair characterization, I suppose?
certainly, yes, it's possible that a road could be improved to improve its safety performance.
All right, so that's kind of the main subject I wanted to ask you about. I did want to ask about this conclusion about the, it's underlined on the first page of Exhibit 2.1. It says there is currently not adequate curb radii to accommodate construction vehicles along Beaverbrook Road at the intersection with Beaverbrook Court. Do you know specifically what kind of vehicles the construction company is going to use in this project?
I do not, but unless they are passenger vehicles, what we would commonly refer to as construction vehicles would not be able to adequately be accommodated in that curve. So I would say that by definition, being construction vehicles have those larger characteristics. Moving anything that's going to be moving large equipment and materials is going to be of a sufficient size that will not be able to traverse that curve safely.
But you don't know exactly what kind of vehicles will be used, correct?
That's correct. I do not know the specific vehicles, but looking at what are typical construction vehicles is characterized in the memo, in the exhibit.
And is it possible that a construction company could make changes to the way it plans to deliver materials, et cetera, to this site if there were a safety concern?
No way.
I would say it's hypothetically possible. I've seen no evidence of those plans, but certainly that's something that we could consider in our analysis if there was a separate plan to move materials and equipment to the site that could impact our findings.
So is it a fair characterization to say that there's a lot of information about the future road conditions here that would be relevant to your conclusions in this report that you just don't have?
No.
Can you restate that? I missed the future.
Let me see, maybe I can do it more clearly. Is it fair to say that there is a lot of information about what may happen with these roads during construction, after construction, as part of this development, that if you had it now and could take it into account, might change your conclusions as stated in this report?
Yeah.
Maybe as I reword it and frame it.
Break it up a little bit. So you said that you have not been provided information about proposed changes or planned changes to these roads, correct?
Correct.
And you stated that if you were provided with those, that information, that you would take that into account in your analysis, correct?
Yeah, I think that would be prudent engineering practice to consider new information.
And you stated that you hadn't asked the developer or anyone else about plans for Beaverbrook Road, correct?
That's correct.
Just 1 second, let me go.
Do you have a question for the witness?
No, for him.
No.
I can't ask him a question?
Well, I mean, it depends
The
what the
lawyer?
question. He's not sworn in. He doesn't provide any testimony or evidence.
But it's a clarification question.
If you want to ask him. Mr. Sword, board member wants to ask you a question. You are not sworn in. You're not providing evidence. He
Right,
has a
it's just a clarification. Can you tell me if the developer has in place right now?
That's not a clarification question. That would be asking him to introduce evidence, and it's not sworn.
Never mind.
Like if you didn't understand the way you worded it or something, but we can't ask for other
Gotcha.
information.
Well, I had a clarification that's similar, just on the way you're asking questions. See, you're asking Dr. Finley to give his opinion on hypothetical what-if kind of situations. I don't know that that's fair for him to make a judgment on something he doesn't have
any detail on. It seems irrelevant to determine her
And does
standing.
that have to do with standing? That's.
Well, what
that's
I'm
we're
trying to
talking
point
about.
out is, I'm not asking him to provide me with answers based on hypothetical information. What I'm trying to point out is that there is information that he did not take into account when he prepared this report.
Does it exist? Does that information exist?
It,
No? I can't, I'm
We-
sorry.
No, yeah.
I want to be a
Let's,
lawyer.
we'll let him ask the questions.
I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry.
Sorry, Mr. Schwartz.
I think that's all I can ask. There's one that I'm just burning to ask, but I think it's improper of me putting evidence into the record if I did. So I think that's all I got.
I have probably just a couple clarifying redirects. Hi, Dr. Finley, this is John again. So just a couple clarifying questions. Your analysis and opinions are based on the best, I just want to be clear, you base those on the best information and data that's available to you as of right now, correct?
That's correct, using the development plans and the existing characteristics of the roadway.
And those plans were provided by the developer to the town, correct?
I received those plans from you, and so I assume that you know the provenance of those plans.
Fair enough, fair enough. You got a question about construction vehicles and not knowing the specific construction vehicle. And while you probably don't know the license plate of the concrete truck that's going to show up on whichever date, I want to be clear here, within your industry, you have standard measurements for what typical construction vehicles will look like in their characteristics, correct?
That is correct, and that's what we based our analysis on.
And that's what you used for your analysis, correct?
That's correct.
Not made-up numbers, but standard numbers used in the industry for these types of vehicles.
That is correct.
Those are my clarifying questions.
So do we have any other questions for this witness? Witness, is that?
Yeah, yes.
Witness?
Dr. Findlay is a witness.
Okay, so we don't, but I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to know for the record, I see the town shaking their head no.
The town
Yeah, I
has
already
any
asked.
questions for the witness, and we
Okay.
present the entry of the report in the record.
And if I can ask, I believe we have another witness for this standing.
We do, and I know you wanted to take a break, so I'm
Yes.
happy to take that break, but I did ask that the board rule on admitting the report into
Oh,
evidence now that
sorry.
those questions have been asked.
And there's been there was an objection made. I think they made an objection, if I recall.
That was to continue presenting the report.
So we made an objection to cumulative presentation of this evidence
Right.
that's already in the report. We did not object to the report itself. We did reserve the right to, if this goes to court, challenge this with our own expert testimony, et cetera. And we also asked some potential questions about the information that went into this. We do not have an objection to this report being added to the record this year.
Okay. Do we, on the board, have any objections to this, admitting this? No. Then your report will be admitted as evidence.
How long of a break would you like to
At least 7:30.
No, I'm going to say 15 minutes, so we can
Thank you.
come back at
7:30.
7:35. That work all right for everybody? Because there's a lot of people in a very small bathroom, so we'll make it 7:35, we'll adjourn, come back.
Reconvene.
Yes, thank you. I had it once, but I couldn't think of it, yes.
Recommence.
Thank you. Reconvene, that's exactly the word. I've
Readjourn.
been waiting for 15 minutes to say this, and I forgot what to say. Let me see if that were turned off. Video.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
When this standing presentation gets over, I'll remind you, but we still have to jump back into where we were from.
Yeah, I know, we haven't got.
Yeah, we haven't gotten very far at all.
I think it's the only person who's going to be.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Are we? Recess and reconvene, I don't know why I had all my head.
Yeah. Yo, I don't care.
So everybody's microphones are still on.
Oh.
Everybody's microphones are still on,
If I turn this off,
probably. But just say, feel free to use my office.
oh, can we use your office?
Yes, one.
Perfect.
We were told not to ask questions, so we're not going to ask.
It'll be, I think it'll be more here, but basically right now, all we're trying to do is
No, I think we understand that.
In the end,
What was the original decision? Oh, okay. I'm sure you'd be.
I mean, no, it's okay, it's all a matter of public record, so it's in your record book.
Yeah, I know.
So if you wanna hand me a copy of your record, I'll. No, you're fine.
Who's asking for the appeal? I guess that's my answer.
So it's kind of like an evolution. Like it starts with the site plan, and then there are these email, conversations, and then there was another site.
I saw a lot of that, like revisions and.
We got it in time, we didn't get it in time, we were on pause, So I went through all that stuff.
I can read better like this.
Me too. It's because I can go back and forth.
It's all simple. Where does this application stand with the township? And that's an easier way to word it.
So this is the letter that I wrote on September 30th, 2022 that they has.
Okay.
So that might help you a little bit. It's sort of the, but then what's in front of that is like everything that happened leading up to it.
It's just hard to understand what we're reviewing the purpose for.
Yeah.
So, okay, thank you.
And then I think we have, then there's a revised plan based on that opinion.
This is Rick from Nashville with
Yeah, it's a funny little donut hole, unincorporated area. So like the Bernstein's, they don't live there with them. This property's in there, but they're actually in our house. And then just a little bit down the road is Ashland.
All right, thank you.
One of those crazy intersections.
Sorry to interrupt. I just-
No, you're fine. That's kind of
I'm
what
trying to
we're
get on the same
talking
page.
There was no. I'm guessing that you said it.
Professor? Yeah. He's a professor. It's a, what he does.
I've been proposed a couple times. So,
Sometimes knowledge experts get a little. Let's go. Any exam, check this. Sure, if you get more information.
Anyhow, I just thought I'd give you a quick call because we took a little break. Man, a lot. This is going on and on. The lawyers are paying questions and there weren't clarification questions, and you said, no, they can't ask them. It was the lawyer, I was gonna ask the lawyer questions. Anyway, I just wanted to touch base with you and just hear your voice. Well, I can, but I can only ask questions of clarification because of our ultimate decision. It has nothing to do with, well, if I ask a question like, is the planner proposing to do something? You know, that would be at another time. You know, I probably could ask that question, but not at this time, at this juncture, you know? Anyway. Is everybody doing okay? Okay, sounds good. I just wanted to hear your voice. I'm not gonna say I'm sorry that I am, but you're just absolutely right, and I probably need to get more on an even keel. It has nothing to do anymore even with being impatient. It's more than that. It's being nasty, and then it being nice, you know. Okay, we'll have to see about something to work on that, okay? All right. Okay, so it looks like we'll be here until at least 9 o'clock. Oh, yeah. Is everything, you know, like it said, do you need me to do anything here? Oh, I'll be fine. I'll be fine. Yeah, because when I get home, I'm gonna go to sleep in a short time, you know, even if I get home at 9. I wake up at 6:30 or 7 or something. That's more than enough time for me to get to school and everything, okay? Yeah, don't worry about that. I'm okay. All right, take care. I love you.
Have to get a date together. But I told Daphne.
He's gonna do what he's gonna do.
Yeah, make sure that it's.
All righty.
That's something from something of yours?
I don't know what that is.
No, I think it's a plug from the chair.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Ah, I'm sorry, but
So,
weren't you getting
talking
kind
about
of...
chair plugs or hair plugs?
Oh, no. Oh, you're so cute.
I need the hair plugs.
I know.
I heard
Weren't
that.
you guys getting frustrated with the lawyers? The questions they're asking?
But we're not
I know it.
attorneys.
I know it.
And we're supposed to be open-minded
I know.
and
I know.
non-partisan.
I understand.
So,
Yeah, no, I totally understand it, and I haven't formed a judgment, but I just feel like
I didn't even take a ride to
better
go to this
questions.
place. I didn't know we were supposed to do it, but I think I might take a ride tomorrow just to get an idea, so we have an idea. 'cause
Well,
I have no
I just
idea
saw
this is
where
gonna
it's
happen.
located. But I didn't go up the hill and blah, 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 and, you know, all that.
Just a reminder that the microphones are still on.
Yes.
Oh, okay, thank you. Thank you.
Saw a case of water or something, wasn't it? Steal them. There we go. They got big bottles. There's the.
I knew it was a 4-hour meeting.
To check to see if I have food in my teeth. Oh, gosh.
Blankets and hot warmers. So you have to have the big
Need someone, please.
All right. Good that you had a break.
I understand your desire to ask the lawyer questions, and that's a good desire.
Yeah, right. Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Okay.
Thank you for that, Michael. Yes.
I forgot about that.
When did it turn the air up? Feels like everyone's freezing.
Air up or down?
Oh, so it wasn't very hot before.
Yeah, it was hot, and then
Now
they,
it's really cold.
Shannon, when she comes back in, we can ask Shannon. I mean, I see the thermostat, but I don't want to
yeah, right.
touch it. So you're a little cold also, so warming up won't hurt you?
Yeah.
All right.
So you came straight from work to here?
Well, I dressed multiple layers.
You are
Yes,
dedicated. Woo.
Meeting that went long. I had a little gap planned, and then I kind of
Yeah, it was
ate it all
gone.
up.
What a shame.
Hey, Brian.
See if I can confirm with Shannon, I can turn up a knob.
Wait, there's a whole lot of lawyers in this room right now. That's the town lawyer? I never heard of him or heard his name before. And then Noor, I've heard of him, and then those two, and then this guy. There's a lot of lawyers. It's like, how many lawyers does it take to?
I'm sorry?
To open a bottle
Yeah, I
of
know,
water?
so it won't stay in there.
You got a lot of them here
I'm
today.
all by myself today.
Yeah, you did. There's a whole lot of them here today.
I found a spot worked. Perfect. Okay, we
Where'd
can,
you get that bottle?
Yeah, I think we're waiting on Shannon,
oh, okay.
unless John Henning is happy to go with
Rick?
that.
If you can hear me, you might want to turn your camera on, and, yeah, we've not started back yet, but we're about to. I just want to make sure you're ready for when the board gavels us back in.
Yeah, and make sure we have questions, we don't direct them to the attorneys, we ask the
Thank you.
witnesses.
All right. When can I ask those questions of the attorney?
Rick, can you hear us all right?
Yeah, can you hear me?
We're ready.
Once everybody quiets down in the room, we'll have you talk up to the lane, the court reporter can hear.
Okay.
Let's bring this meeting to order, please. One, two. So Shannon's the only one missing. All right.
But Mr. Henning said go ahead without.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, let's continue where we left off. We're still in the process of determining
Standing.
standing. Thank you. Sorry, it's been a long day. Determining standing. Please proceed.
Thank you,
Board,
Mr.
board.
Chairman. Mr. Robinson, can you hear me?
I can you hear me?
Okay, everyone is nodding, we can, so we'll go ahead and get in this. This should be a much shorter presentation than the last one. Your analysis is much more direct. Can you give your full name for the court reporter, please?
My name is Richard M. Robeson, R-O-B-S-O-N.
Okay, Mr. Robeson, where do you work?
I work for the North Carolina Appraisal Company.
Okay, and what's your title? North Carolina Appraisal Company.
Oh, okay.
And what's your title with the appraisal company?
I'm the president.
Okay, and what work do you do for the North Carolina Appraisal Company?
I'm a real estate appraiser.
Okay, and what degrees do you hold? Just sort of some background about you.
Well, I studied real estate at FSU in Tallahassee. I have the 2 highest designations you can get in the appraisal profession, and I'm the only person in North Carolina west of Asheville, Scotland. I do pretty much any kind of real property appraisal, commercial, residential, land. I've got a broad background.
And when you said those designations, were you referring to the MAI designation?
Yes, and the SRA designation.
Okay. And are you familiar with the proposed project site?
I am.
Okay. Did you make a visit to Beaverbrook Road in that area to become familiar with it, more familiar with it?
I did.
Okay. And have you been qualified as an expert in the appraisal field by any court or other quasi-judicial body like a Board of Adjustment in the past?
Yes, federal courts, state courts, county courts, Haywood County, Transylvania, Jackson, Macon.
Okay. And did you prepare a consulting report as part of your analysis?
I did.
And as part of that, did you include your resume?
I'm sure I did, yes.
I've marked document as Exhibit 3.1 going through 3.12. Mr. Robeson, I'm showing you that document. Can you identify what this document is?
It is my report.
Okay, this is the report you prepared and
For tonight.
for tonight. Is that your signature and seal on page 3.6?
It is.
And is your resume included in there as towards the end? I think it's the qualifications of appraiser portion.
Yes.
Okay. At this time, and again, a couple more just foundational questions. You are a licensed appraiser within the state of North Carolina, correct?
Yes, I am.
Okay. At this point, we'd ask that Mr. Robeson be qualified as an expert in land valuation and appraising.
On behalf of HS Robinhood, we have no objection at this time to that. I would just note for the record that we're reserving a right to challenge that at a later time, given the fact we've just been introduced to Mr. Robeson and have not had an opportunity to review his CV or any other credentials.
Understood.
Town would have no objection.
Any questions or objection from the board? Okay, then let's,
And for the record, you're accepting him
Yes,
as the
please.
next expert in those areas,
that's correct.
In land valuation?
Yeah, I said land valuation and appraisal.
Not land use, just land valuation.
Land valuation, different. Okay, looking at your report, and we'll do this again much more briefly because your report is much more targeted. But let's talk about the data and let's talk about how you went about what you did, okay? So starting with the data, can you talk about the information you reviewed, collected, and relied upon in forming your analysis?
Well, we inspected the property. We looked at aerial photographs, topographic maps, the plans that we were provided. We searched the area of multiple listing real estate services for information. We used our historical information that we've put together from past assignments and interviewed people that were related to those past assignments.
And within your industry, would those facts and data be used, that you just mentioned, would those be sufficient to perform the kind of analysis you did in this case?
Yes, that's why we did it.
Okay, and did you independently investigate and collect that information that you used?
I did.
Was the other data you used provided from independent sources? And I guess what I'm getting at here is you're not just relying on what Ms. Bernstein or Mr. Bernstein or CRLU told you, correct?
Well, I didn't talk to any of them, so no. But I verified all the information that I considered in forming this report.
Okay. And I think in your report you mentioned, did you use the USPAP standards as part of your report and analysis?
You have to use USPAP standards in all appraisal-related work.
let's be clear, and I don't want to assume board members know what USPAP is. Can you spell that out for the board so they understand what?
Sure, it's an acronym. It stands for Uniform Uniform Services of Professional Appraisal Practice. It's actually a federal document that tells all appraisers how to do their work so that what one appraiser does is based on the same standards as another.
And you, again, use those standards. They're commonly used in the industry. You applied them in this analysis.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Is it, I think you'd indicated that essentially they're required for all appraisers to use, correct?
Yes.
Based on that analysis, what conclusions have you been able to reach about the impact of the proposed development on the value of adjoining properties, including the Bernsteins?
Well, one of the things that we talked about was the traffic. Dr. Finley addressed it in his way, but during our inspection, I could see that the road system was not going to be sufficient to handle the construction trucks that would be needed to either bring building supplies to the subject proposed development or the trucks that would be used to bring the heavy equipment that would be used to move the land around. It's not uncommon for a construction company to not be able to get to a site. And so they have to figure out some other way to do it. And I don't know the fellow's name, but the question that Mr. Finley was asked before was, what if they use different sized trucks? That's a possibility, but if you're going to use smaller trucks, you just have to use twice as many of them. So whereas the alternate use of different trucks, and use of different trucks might improve the situation, the increase in truck traffic would offset that. We talked about.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I didn't mean to cut you
No,
off.
that's all right.
I was just
I was going to change subjects. Go ahead.
I'll go ahead at this point. So where I was trying to get you to sort of direct your attention to is in the appraisal field, you've looked at the impact this would have on the value of the Bernstein's property and the surrounding and the adjoining properties, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Can you talk to the board about what your conclusions were about that?
Well, we talked about the traffic would be a problem. The noise from the traffic would be a problem. The lights from the development would be a problem. This is going to be a motel-type operation, 100 and something parking spaces that will be lit all night, so the people staying in these units can come and go with safety. And all of those issues will have a negative impact on the value of the adjacent properties like the Bernsteins and others that are less close by.
Just before moving on, I believe he characterized this as a motel operation. Just for the record, that is not the case, and there is going to be more than adequate evidence that this is not a motel, if that was my understanding of what he said.
For the board's purposes, I mean, objections can be made, but you have to object to the testimony that's given, not offer testimony yourself about what's going to come in the future. So I think that's an improper objection, and if I can be allowed to continue with the questions to Mr. Robeson, we'll get through those fairly
Maybe the town is in
quickly.
a better position to voice an objection there, and the town does register an objection to conclusions as to the land use. That is the point of the town's presentation in this case, which you're going to do shortly. So, town will object.
So, Mr. Robeson, let's setting aside, I think you described it as a motel. I'm not really asking you to get into what kind of land use it is. But if I heard you correctly, what you were saying is that the development as proposed, based on the site plans and information you reviewed that was provided by the applicant to the town, it is your opinion that the proposed project at issue will substantially diminish and impair the value for the adjacent and nearby properties. I think that's on page 4 of your report. Did I read that correctly?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. Can you talk through with the board, you mentioned traffic, what are some of the other reasons that you came to that conclusion?
Well, if you have 400, 600, 800, 900 cars a day coming and going from the proposed development, you're going to have traffic noise. And the noise is going to be a negative to a single-family subdivision that is not accustomed to that kind of noise. You will have light problems, this property, regardless of what you label it as, is going to need to have all-night lighting outside so the people staying there can come and go in safety and security, and those lights will be seen from miles around. This property is on the top of a mountain. Now, if you look at it, all you're seeing is the dark top of a mountain. But if you put 110 units up there, again, regardless of what you call the operation, and you have to have lit parking for those units because people are going to show up at night and they're going to want to leave at night, then that light is going to be seen forever. In terms of value, there is a concept called external obsolescence, sometimes called locational obsolescence, but it is defined as a type of depreciation, a diminution in value caused by negative external influences and generally incurable on the part of the owner, landlord, and or tenant. The external influence may be either temporary or permanent. In this case, if Ms. Bernstein is at home at night, she's going to be seeing these lights, and again, I haven't met her, so I'm not making this personal. She's going to be seeing these lights every night. And when she decides to sell her house, she's going to have to disclose that issue to any potential buyer. And someone paying $500,000 or $1 million for a home doesn't want these external issues that they're going to have to deal with. So they either don't buy the property at all, or they pay a lot less for it than they would have otherwise. So one way or the other, light, noise, traffic, all of these, and this is just common sense. They will all have a negative impact on value.
And you came up with those numbers in that sort of 500,000 to 3 million range. That's you looking at the MLS. I'm talking about the value portion of your report on page 3. You pulled that data from the MLS.
Yes.
As part of that. Correct?
Yes. Yes.
Are you speculating, that's what current homes are selling?
No, I looked it up so that I would know what I was talking about. This is one of the better neighborhoods. Getting from Marymount Avenue to the subject property is one of the better sections of single-family residential real estate in Asheville. There's a golf course there. There's a private country club there. Mm-hmm. And if you all of a sudden dump 900 cars a day coming and going from Marymount up to the subject property, that's going to have a huge negative impact on value, not only of Ms. Bernstein's property, but every property that someone has to drive by in order to get from Marymount up to the subject property.
But to be clear, your analysis is really limited to the Bernstein property and those adjoining properties to the development, correct?
That was my conclusion. I'm just saying it's worse than that.
Yeah. So, in sort of wrapping things up, because I don't want to belabor it, you formed this based on the information that you pulled. You've applied it through the USPAP standards in your report, and that your conclusion is it's going to substantially diminish and impair the value of the property for the Bernsteins, correct?
Yes.
Those would be my questions. I'm happy for the board to ask clarifying, but I know we're trying to be mindful of time and move things along. We would ask at this point that the exhibit, 3.1 through 3.12 be admitted into the record.
Again, on behalf of HS Robin Hood and owner, no objections for purposes of this hearing. We had requested these reports in the affidavits prior to this so we could evaluate them. We were not provided them. So we are, for purposes of the record, reserving our right to challenge these at a later time.
Thank you. Any questions from the board members?
I don't.
Is any no reason to deny this?
Bring it on.
Nope.
Okay. This evidence is admitted to record.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Question from opposing councils or the board if they have questions? Of Mr. Robeson.
Any questions? Any questions? Seeing none. I guess we say thank you to the witness.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Robson.
Robeson.
Robson.
See you later.
You dismissed me?
Rick, you are free to leave and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Who?
Thank you very much.
Oh, him. What about us? No.
So the presentation for standing for Ms. Bernstein has
Sorry.
been made.
Yes.
So this board can make a motion to allow her for party status, basically a party with standing, to participate fully in this hearing, which gives her the right to confront and cross-examine witnesses, make a closing statement, and present evidence.
And attorneys on her behalf as well?
Yeah, the attorneys will act probably on her behalf. Ms. Bernstein doesn't want to do that.
Do we have any questions from the board regarding this? Okay, do we have a motion that we grant party withstanding?
I'll make that motion.
Yes, I'm trying to get the name right.
Jessica and Alex
Jessica
Bernstein.
and Alex.
Ms. Bernstein. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I apologize, I just want to make sure, are we just addressing Ms. Bernstein standing at this point?
I think Jessica, Mr. and Mrs.
And the citizen for responsibility, CRLU.
Okay.
CRLU.
sorry, I need one of the. And the citizens for
CRLU.
Okay.
Yeah, so we,
If we're addressing CRLU standing as well, we would just move to dismiss them under 160D 14023, or C3. It specifically says that for an association to have standing, they can't be formed or created in response to a particular development. Our position is that based on the articles of organization that were presented, CRLU was in fact formed to just solely challenge the development. The statute looks actually at the purpose when it was created. I know they tried to introduce testimony that they tried to broaden their purpose, but again, the articles of organization were pretty clear. There was a singular purpose for why they were formed. And under 160D 1402C, sorry, 160, where is that what you're at? 160D 1402? 60D, yeah, 1402C3. We believe that there's no associational standing for purposes of CRLU.
Can I ask a question? Can I ask a question? Am I allowed?
If it's a legal question, he can respond to it in a legal sense. Or do you want to ask me the question? I don't know who you're going to ask a question to.
I was gonna ask, he wants to eliminate CRLU because of the fact that it was formed specifically to deter development
Of the property that is at issue in this case.
of the
That's
property
correct.
that is an issue. Now, this CRLU was formed in 2016.
Correct.
So was the property at that point in time, was there somebody who was, or is it just in general that, well, we don't want to see this property developed by anybody?
That's correct. The purpose under the Articles of Organization was to challenge any development of this property that is at issue, and I believe Ms. Bernstein testified to that fact.
Okay.
So under North Carolina law, for associational standing, you cannot be created for the sole purpose of challenging development. You have to be created for a broader purpose. Now, they are trying to argue, I believe, that there is a broader purpose now, but under the statute, it says you're looking at the time that it was created. And so our position is just under North Carolina law, CRLU does not have associational standing.
Okay, I understand that.
Kind of you heard in response. So, one, we showed you what our purpose is, not the old one, the current one. Okay? And it is much broader than opposing any one project. Now, let's talk about the exhibit one they offered. Okay? To prevent the cornerstone development. This is not the cornerstone development.
Right.
Okay? And let's look at what the law actually says. You know, I'm quoting from 160D 1402C3.
Can we put that on the screen
I will definitely
to also read?
right now. Yes, give me 1 second.
They said that cornerstone is the same thing as this one.
You're going to see all of my children's apps on my iPad. So I apologize
Cute.
for that. can quote it, but I lost internet connection.
I have it up on my computer. I don't know if I can use that, if that hooks.
Tell me the width and internet is no longer available.
Yeah, John, I think we can, is it possible to hook this computer?
I have to ask Shannon, or maybe Ricky, I don't know. Yes.
Plug in.
We've had trouble with some displays not working, but.
No signal.
There you go.
I knew it said that somewhere.
Is it still January 25th?
Here.
Oh, God.
Someone called that, and it's been 6-7 years.
Function F8.
There we go.
It's a race. Who gets it first?
Okay.
We get it?
Yeah, we got it.
Yeah, that's it, yeah.
Whoa,
we had
it
it.
disappeared.
Come on.
It disappeared.
There we go.
There.
Okay.
Okay.
So there's, it's C3, and it's the portion of the statute that says, and the association was not created in response to the particular development or issue that is the subject of the property. And again, it's our position that,
I think this is I was reading from that on my side of the argument in response.
Mr. Chairman, I believe he was, but
Yes.
that's up to you. Yep.
So if I could finish. So my point here, the language that's even how it was not created in response to the particular development or issue that is the subject of this appeal.
Which is
It's not
Cornerstone.
development.
Not
Okay?
Cornerstone.
So it's not.
Yeah, don't talk, because Madam Court Reporter takes down everything that's being said. And I think she's having confusing,
I'm sorry.
or conflicting.
That exception does not apply here. This was created back in 2016. They were created among many things that are in that list. Cornerstone development, to prevent other developers from building on steep slope property, not a particular property, but property in general. Failure to prevent development, not development generally, to ameliorate the negative impacts of development, not development, but development broadly, by any legal means available, and to purchase the property to place in an appropriate conservancy. Multiple different reasons and purposes that have nothing to do with this particular development or issue on appeal, so it just doesn't apply.
Was this property once called Cornerstone? Is that how this came to be?
Cornerstone was a prior company that was under contract to develop this property, and CRLU was formed, challenged it. Cornerstone ended up not purchasing the property. It's the same property at issue, and again, the purpose of this is to prevent associations from being created solely to challenge development. So I understand what he's trying to argue as far as, hey, it's not Cornerstone, it's another one, but the reality is the purpose and intent of the statute was to prevent organizations forming for the purpose that CRLU did. And their purpose, again, in 2016, as stated in the Articles of Organization, was solely to challenge development, and that's what the statute's intended to prevent.
Also, to answer your question, Scott, now, this wasn't just this piece of property. It was a much larger piece of property. This property is a much smaller portion of that.
Okay.
And also keep in mind, that was one of many purposes, okay, not exclusive. And so again, and that's not this development.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like us to be able to discuss this.
Yes,
up
and
here.
get some legal assistance also.
Yes, if you don't mind, yes, I can read it to them, but it's great if they have it up here.
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead, discuss.
So, we're not lawyers.
No, but the statute is what it is, and we'll take Mr. and Mrs. Bernstein separately, since there's been this
Right.
issue raised for CRLU.
So we can separate the
If I
state.
can register an objection before you deliberate. There were statements made about how this was the same property or not, but the lawyer can't testify. So they can't introduce evidence themselves about this. No one has, there's been no witness
that has been sworn in and provided that this was the same property, that this was exactly part of that. I mean, that's just a statement that is unsworn and provided by the attorney, and there is no factual basis for it. And I don't think it can be relied upon by the board.
I asked Ms. Bernstein that exact question, and she said yes. So that was not my testimony, that was the testimony of his witness.
Earlier.
Okay.
Yeah. It's your duty to recall the evidence that was presented, and what Ms. Bernstein's testimony was. So it would be my recommendation for the board to take them separately, because there was an objection raised to CRLU. I think it would be easier, well, and I shouldn't say it like that, deal with Mr. and Mrs. Bernstein first.
Right.
The board has any questions, if they want to deliberate, but throw up a motion to allow their status as parties to this proceeding, if that's what you would choose the motion to be.
That sounds good.
So is everybody okay separating them? We're all good separating them? Okay. So do we have any questions or objections?
You'll have to speak up into the microphone.
I'm sorry. Does anyone on the board have any questions or objections to granting standing with, party with standing for the Bernsteins
No.
specifically? Mr. and Mrs. Bernstein. Okay, so do I have a motion that we,
I so move that we give the Mr. and Mrs. Bernstein standing for this hearing.
okay, a second?
Yes, I'm good.
Okay. So, in favor? Everyone? Aye. Okay, motion is approved. Mr. and Mrs. Bernstein are granted party withstanding.
And so for CRLU, what you're going to be looking at, Mr. Portnoy put it up there, it talks about, you can see it in there, 160D 1402, C in paren 3, and it talks about the portions that are important is standing can be conferred upon an incorporated or unincorporated association, and I'm skipping down, so long as at least one of the members of the association would have standing as an individual to challenge the decision, and the association was not created in response to the particular development or issue that is subject of, and it says appeal, but I'll say of this matter.
Okay.
So from my perspective, the particular development isn't the issue because Cornerstone was a separate thing, but or issue. And or issue for me seems like what we have to define, what that issue is that was CRLU was founded for, and what their purpose was, and then whether it's the same now. You know, whether that's,
Didn't you read that if there's a member like Mrs.
Yeah,
Bernstein?
but it's
who is-
and the association.
Yeah. And the association was not created, I think that's highlighted in blue.
Yeah.
Okay.
So based upon the testimony that I have been listening to,
It's a different development, but same issue.
it's the same issue, and the one statement said it covered all properties on
Thereafter?
steep slope,
Oh, yeah.
and I believe it said that.
Yeah, that's right.
So,
Right. And the association was not created in response to the development or issue that is subject of this matter.
okay. So, again, I'm looking, my opinion would be, and I'll ask for a legal advice on this, but my opinion, I'm saying that it was created to challenge this type of issue. Am I reading it, am I understanding it correctly?
This type. But I guess what they're trying to say is someone didn't all of a sudden decide to incorporate an organization just to defend a particular builder who's trying to develop a property right now. That's what I read when I see this. It's like, it was the challenge.
Take the word after the word or issue that is subject of the appeal. So is this an issue that is subject to this appeal?
Not to this particular one, no. Is it?
This is the issue.
Yeah,
Exactly what's in this book in my mind.
that's the issue. It's not just in general.
Yeah, I guess, okay, what's your opinion?
No, I understand what you're saying.
Like what I'm seeing is that the issue is
It
that no
seems-
one can develop certain types of areas. and which it's being this steep slope. So this appeal is to develop yes or no on a steep slope. So I think in that case, then this group was formed for that last half of that blue sentence, in my opinion. That's why I'm asking.
So the,
You can clarify the,
yeah, so the record of decision was made, the issues that are before this board for the appeal consist of whether it was a group development, whether the development proposed to the town was a group development or a multifamily building, whether it was just a simple ministerial review, and whether the correct application of the permit choice law applied, whether or not the staff based its determination on what ordinance to use based on its first application of May 17th. So those are what the issues are in this appeal. It's not about whether the development gets approved or not. I think it's the difference between a group development, multifamily building, what type of approval it requires, ministerial approval, and whether, and basically what ordinance we review this application under. That's what we're looking at.
Okay.
But that's just to clarify. But differing minds can differ, so it's good, hear it, and then you can call it for a vote and vote either way. But you look at the specific language is an incorporated or unincorporated association, so long as at least one of the members would have standing, sorry, Josh, as an individual, and the association was not created in response to the particular development or issue that is subject of the matter before this board.
So in that case, the group was not created after this was brought
It's your duty to
attention.
recall the evidence, yeah.
That's what I am interpreting.
Okay. So then, I guess then we're looking for, do we have a motion to approve or grant party withstanding for, I'm sorry, I have to get this whole,
SC.
we have it somewhere what it's.
CRLU.
I don't know.
For that, yes,
Yeah.
please. Would someone like to make a motion to grant party withstanding for that group?
I make the motion to grant standing to the CRLU for this appeal.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, those in favor? Aye. Okay, it is approved. So we officially grant party withstanding to that group, otherwise known as?
CRLU.
Thank you. I gotta write that down. Okay.
Mr. Portnoy, are you standing up because you have a question? Oh, you can get your computer back. The next item on our outline for the board are ethical considerations. Of course, this board has to be fair and impartial when it makes a determination based on the parties. Now that we know who the parties are, Mr. and Mrs. Bernstein, CRLU, and the property owner, and Mr. Portnoy, I'm going to call on you to tell me who the property owner is.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
We were about to raise the issue of, do we need to establish that H.S. Robin Hood is the property?
Do we need to establish?
The issue of whether H.S. Robin Hood is the property owner and therefore has the right to participate in this hearing.
I was just going to ask you about that so that we could consider that for ethical considerations. But yes, Mr. Swart, please, that would be very appropriate for you to identify the property owner.
So I'll do that by calling Jason Corden.
If you don't mind sitting over there. Have you been sworn in?
I will be now.
Corden, C-O-R-D-O-N.
C-O-R-D-O-N, Gordon.
Correct.
Mr. Gordon, if you can raise your right hand.
All right.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please say, I do.
I do.
All right, Mr. Corden, can you tell us who you are?
I'm a principal at Hatteras Sky.
And what is Hatteras Sky?
It's a real estate development firm.
And how is Hatteras Sky associated with this matter?
Hatteras Sky as an entity owns 100% of HS Robin Hood LLC.
And does HS Robin Hood Owner LLC own property located at 99999 Robin Hood Road and 53 Beaverbrook Road?
Yes.
All right. I will hand a couple of copies out. And I am handing you a document that I will ask you some questions about.
Two?
I'll go ahead and ask this be marked Exhibit 2. Mr. Corden, what did I just hand you?
Property record search.
Does this appear to be a printout of the property card for, sorry, this actually consists of a couple of separately stapled items. Does the first one appear to be the Buncombe County Assessment Property Record Search property card for 99999 Robin Hood Road?
I'm looking to see where that's at, the 999, yes, okay, yes, I see one for 99959 Robin Hood Road.
And that page that you're looking at, does that, is HS Robin Hood Owner LLC mentioned on that page at all?
Yes, at the top.
Does this property card printed from the Buncombe County Tax Assessment Records reflect that HS Robin Hood Owner LLC is the owner of 99999 Robin Hood Road?
Yes.
And turning to the second stapled document, does this appear to be the same type of document for 53 Beaverbrook Road?
Yes, it does.
And does this also show that, according to the Buncombe County Property Tax Records, HS Robin Hood Owner LLC is the owner of 53 Beaverbrook Road?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, we would ask that these documents be, we can admit them as a single document, Exhibit 2, into evidence. Mr. Chair.
My apologies.
Yeah, just ask if anybody has any objections.
Any objections? And any questions, concerns?
This is the
Yes.
property card.
Property cards, yep.
And please, go ahead.
Okay. I was going to say, I have a question. I thought this was one single property, but it's two properties. It's two different properties owned by the same person?
Yes.
Owned by the
Yes.
same company?
Yes.
Okay, so it's just that you're putting the two together.
Yes, yes, there are a number of properties associated, as you've been hearing.
But basically, right now, what we're looking at with this Robin Hood thing is two separate pieces of real estate that you're
That's
putting.
correct, I think that's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe that's
Okay.
correct, yeah.
So two parcels will be
Yeah,
incorporated.
One
into
of
development.
these, and I'm getting this from here to give context,
Okay.
one of them is, it says on here, 16.29 acres.
Oh, okay.
And then the other is .64 acres.
So it's a total of 17 point something acres?
Sure, whatever those add up to, I'll go with your math,
And,
not
I mean,
mine.
but that is what we're looking at, the property?
And we're putting on evidence, they will ask for standing for the property owner, but we're putting on evidence of who owns the property, which will help
Okay.
in our ethical
Okay.
considerations.
We intend to address this property in
Sure.
full, but I believe for this limited purpose, my attorney wants to ask these questions of me.
Okay,
so-
okay.
Yes, the point of this is fairly limited, and it is because we have to satisfy the statute that we have a right to participate in this
Right,
hearing. We were
right.
not the one who filed the appeal, but we have standing under, I will have mercy on the court reporter and not give you the full citation, but we have standing
Uh-huh.
because HS Robin Hood Owner LLC has an ownership interest in the property that is the subject of the decision being appealed.
Okay, and so you're looking for
And the
standing.
reason, just for further argument, the reason we looked at the property tax records is because 160D-10218 provides that absent evidence to the contrary, a local government may rely on the county tax records to determine who is the landowner.
Okay.
So we would ask
Got
that
it.
the board confirm that we have the right to participate in this hearing as a party withstanding, and that is all there is to it.
And just to clear, oh,
Oh, did you rule on admitting these to the record?
I think you did. I think you admitted it. There was no objection.
There was no objections?
yeah, I just wanted to clarify one thing, and so these indicate that Robin Hood LLC is the owner, and do we have anything showing that who Hatteras Sky is? That they're the owner of Robin Hood, is that right?
I can
Ask him right
testify to it.
Yeah.
HS Robin Hood is Hatteras Sky initials. How about that? We can.
You got it
and-
right there.
Yeah, and Hatteras Sky is our company, and when we go out and buy properties, we will set up an entity to buy that property. That's pretty standard. And so in this case here, HS Robin Hood, owner, was an entity formed that owns these properties, and that entity is owned by Hatteras Sky, and I'm a principal at Hatteras Sky. That's the connection we're making.
Okay.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay, good.
Just to clarify, the town's going to have no objection with consent to it as a party.
Okay.
Just have probably a couple questions. You mentioned you're a principal in Hatteras Sky, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Are you a principal in HS Robinson Owner LLC?
No, I don't believe I have an officer title of this particular entity.
Okay. Did the entity vote to authorize you to provide testimony on its behalf today?
Yes.
Okay. Is that documented?
I don't have anything like that with me, but I am authorized. The manager of Hatteras Sky is sitting in the back of the room right there, Amy Kelly.
So my question was, did HS Robin Hood Owner LLC, which is a separate legal entity from Hatteras Sky, authorize you to testify on its behalf, not Hatteras Sky's behalf?
Yes. It's not in writing, but it is yes, and the person that would do that is sitting in the back of the room. If you want to, happy to have you talk to her. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I want to be very clear with you. The person that can answer that exactly is right there.
You testified to it?
Yep, okay.
Clarifying that-
Sure.
That actually happened. I think that those would be my questions related to standing, but I think we'll have questions back to Brian's ethical, the things you'll go through with your associational relationships that we'll need to clarify about membership interests so that we know whether any of the board members have relationships with any of the principals or
That's a good
entities
point.
that are related to the property. So I'll withhold those questions for now.
So right now, I believe we are determining whether HS Robinson should be granted.
Robin Hood.
Robin Hood.
Thank you. LLC should be granted party withstanding, correct? Okay, does the board have any questions? Okay, do I hear a motion to grant HS Robin Hood LLC party withstanding for this
Sure, we'll make a motion.
motion? The second?
Second.
Okay, so in favor? Aye. It is unanimously approved, so you're granted party withstanding to HS Robin Hood LLC.
Thank you.
You're free to step down.
Thank you.
I'll leave this for someone else.
Thank you, Mr. Corden. So back to it. Thank you, Mr. Sword, for interrupting me and throwing up your client as far as standing in the property owner. North Carolina law requires you to be fair and impartial when making a determination in a quasi-judicial setting. There's specific guidelines set forth in 160D 109 of the general statutes of North Carolina. In quasi-judicial decisions, says that a member of any board exercising quasi-judicial functions pursuant to this chapter shall not participate in or vote on any quasi-judicial matter in a manner that would violate affected person's constitutional right to an impartial decision maker. So my first question is, can everyone here be fair and open-minded, give both parties a fair shake, call it like you see it, be a fair and open-minded umpire?
Yes, sir.
You can be impartial, and not subject to a popularity contest. Put aside your feelings on anything other than the facts that you hear from the witness stand, and you're able to apply those facts to the ordinance as you interpret it to be.
Absolutely, sir.
There's also impermissible violations of due process, which include but aren't limited to a member having a fixed opinion prior to the hearing that is not susceptible to change, undisclosed ex parte communications, a close familial, business, or other associational relationship with an affected person, or a financial interest in the outcome of the matter. We already talked about fixed opinion. No one has a fixed opinion, made up their mind about how they're going to rule in this matter. Anybody have any undisclosed ex parte communications with any of the parties?
I have a question.
Yeah.
We don't know any of the parties. I mean,
Well, it doesn't matter that you don't know them. Somebody that you don't know could send you a letter or stop you on the street.
That's what
They
you're
could,
talking
any
about.
kind of communication.
I got you.
Where no one else was around, where someone attempted to communicate with you.
I understand.
It is not the fact that they tried to communicate with you, which may exclude you from hearing this matter. It is the fact that if you had those ex parte communications and didn't disclose them.
Right.
A lot of times you all may get letters in the mail, an email correspondence, someone stops you on the street. So has anybody had any ex parte communications from anybody, any of the parties related to this matter?
No.
Does anybody have, based on the testimony that we heard, CRLU, Mr. and Mrs. Bernstein, is that right? And does anybody and the property owner, HS Robin Hood LLC, have a close familial, business, or other associational relationship with any of those parties?
No.
Does anybody have a financial interest in the outcome of this matter?
No.
With those questions, I would ask all the parties if they have any follow-up questions to the board members related to the ethical considerations that were just discussed.
Just one couple. One is, Mr. Goulden correctly and appropriately asked you all if you could be unbiased, essentially honest umpire. Call balls and strikes, not favor one party or the other. I just want to clarify that that's also understanding that the town's sitting here and you were appointed by the town into this role, that you can say, you know what, if Mr. Knorr or Ms. Bernstein, they prove their case, I can rule against the town. Are you able to be independent and vote against the town if we were to meet our burden?
Sure. Yes.
Sure. And then my only other questions are whether the board needs additional information on the last group that Mr. Goulden wrote about, whether you have a close familial, associational, or other type of relationship, if you need to know additional members, board members of the relevant entities in order to answer that question. If you don't know who owns it, if you don't know who the principals are, if you don't know who's on the board, the CRLU, we're happy to provide that information to you so that you can say, oh yeah, no, I don't know any of those people, or yes, I do, and we go to church together, and there's just no way I couldn't vote in his or her way.
Again, how do you know? How do we know? I mean, no one's contacted us, me, but who knows who we know? Because we don't know who's in the CLRU or any of that sort of thing.
So it says a close familial, business, or associational relationship. You don't think you know who your close family, business, or
about
association?
going to church and going to church.
You need more information, I'm not.
Oh, okay. So, I mean, if it's just a casual acquaintance, it's one thing, but if, you're right.
A close familial, business, or associational relationship.
Okay, no.
So that's the standard by which to judge your ethical considerations.
Yeah, okay, I don't have any.
I have none.
I'm good.
And you're welcome to ask other questions from anybody about Hatteras Sky, HS Robin Hood, or CRLU.
No.
So those, Mr. North, that would be it from you. Mr. Portnoy, Mr. Sward?
Nothing on behalf of HS Robin Hood owner.
Nothing on behalf of the town.
So then, asking all the parties with standing, does anybody have an objection to this board hearing this matter?
That's a good question.
No objection.
No objection. For the record, no objection based on the information available to me today and the representations that have been
Right.
made by the board members. Obviously, if new information came out, we reserve the right
Yeah,
to change that
good
position.
point.
Not based on
Yeah.
what we've heard as of today.
Sure.
You guys go to the same school? No.
They're lawyers.
So now it would, now we are at the point where we will open up that evidentiary hearing, so you'll need to,
Letter D.
yeah.
Okay. At this point, we're going to open the evidentiary phase of the hearing. And that will move on to the staff presentation. So the zoning administrator or designee will present a summary of the appeal and contents of the file and any other testimony relevant to this matter.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, I believe that the heart of the town's presentation is exactly what you said. It's a summary of the entire matter and then the specifics of all of the documentation put in front of the board. So I don't believe an executive summary is going to be helpful. So I'll launch straight into the town's presentation. Thank you, board members. I don't think we'll say that enough. We recognize, the town recognizes, I know my colleagues do too, that this is a sacrifice that you make for the betterment of your town, of your time and your efforts, and it's appreciated. You're also volunteering to spend a lot of time with a whole bunch of lawyers, so that's
Yeah, really.
that's on you. At any rate, we do appreciate your time and want to use it wisely. It's also very important to town administration that all of this is transparent for its public. This is not just about, for the town, the narrow interest of a particular development. It is about making clear for the people that the town serves that it does so in a transparent manner, that the staff that the town has hired are competent, honest, hardworking people who try to do the right thing by the codes that the town has adopted and the law that underpins them. So having said that, I'm going to first call Adrian Eisenhower, who was the former land use administrator, town planner, I should say.
Yeah.
Brian, do we have to swear everybody in?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Hot seat.
Adrian Eisenhower.
Adrienne.
Eisenhower with an I.
Ms. Eisenhower, my first question for you was going to be to state your name. I think we just covered that.
Can we swear her in real quick? I'm sorry, Ms.
Please,
Rennie.
please.
Yeah. Ms. Eisenhower, I'm sorry, I'm going to swear you in. Will you raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please say, "I do."
I do.
Thank you, Ms. Rennie.
Thank you. I apologize for jumping ahead there. Ms. Eisenhower, could you tell us your current occupation, please?
I'm currently the project manager for the town of Woodfin. Immediately previously to that, I was the planning director for the town of Woodfin for a couple years.
Can you give us the approximate dates that you were the planning director?
October 2020 to August 2022.
I note in the town's ordinances, and I think this has been consistent, that the term zoning administrator is used. Is that the same thing as town planner?
The planning director
I'm
serves
sorry, planning director.
as the zoning administrator, yes.
Okay. Could you share with the board what your training as a zoning official has been?
I received a CZO from the School of Government in 2018, and that's a certification of a zoning official. And it's a class that we take at the UNC School of Government, and then you keep up with continuing education after the fact. So that's the education I've gotten.
Prior to your work with the town of Woodfin, did you have any positions that were required you to act as a zoning official?
I worked for Landisky Regional Council, and served as a zoning administrator for two small towns in that capacity, town of Montreat and town of Biltmore Forest, for about 3 years. Prior to that, several years ago, I was in the planning department with the city of Lenore and served as interim planning director for that same jurisdiction.
Can you describe in sort of just general terms, in your own words, what your duties as a planning director were for the town of Woodfin?
I would accept development applications and review them and determine the best process for approval of those applications. But also review the zoning ordinance and other development ordinances and determine if there were appropriate amendments for compliance with state law.
As part of your duties of receiving applications, you'd make initial determinations about whether they were complete, whether there was more information needed, and so forth.
Yes.
And so I think you testified from October 2020 to August 2022 was your stint as the planning director for town of Woodfin?
Correct.
So you would have been the planning director on May 17th, 2021?
Correct.
I don't think there will be any objection from the parties, but I want to make sure. I'm going to supply this is a copy of the record of decision. Just for orientation for our Board of Adjustment members, the town, once there's an appeal of a zoning determination, and that's to this board, is required to provide the record of decision that the decision was based on. Is what you each have in front of you, and I'm going to be asking the witnesses that I have questions that are related to that. The page numbers you see down in the bottom right-hand corner are RD, that's for record of decision, and then the number. So I'll be referring to that. Also want to point out that up at the witness seat, there are two copies of ordinances. One that, and these were in the sort of the summary of the record of decision that's on the beginning of your packets. So I'll be orienting her to those as well. If I may approach.
And I provided that on behalf of the board to them previously, maybe yesterday. I tried to email it to everybody. Just the record of decision.
So, Ms. Eisenhower, let me first take you to page numbers RD002 through RD006.
Okay.
Are you familiar with this document? It begins with transmittal from CDC.
Yes.
What's your understanding of who CDC is?
They are the firm that submitted the zoning compliance application and site plan on behalf of the property at 9999 Robin Hood Road.
And I should, just as a procedural note, just note for the board, I'm also not going to lay a foundation and ask for admission of each of these things because the parties have stipulated everything that's before you in this record of decision is relevant and admissible for the purposes of this hearing. So you won't hear me do that.
And is there any opinion of how you all want me to label it? What?
Record of decision?
Yeah.
I would just call it that.
I would think it's an entire paginated document, and I don't know that it requires separate.
Excellent, perfect.
Do you recall receiving this as the planning director at the time?
I do.
Do you recall what your impression was in reviewing it?
I needed some more information on compliance with the zoning ordinance at the time.
And you noted at the time that it was, what it was zoned?
Zone Mountain Village.
When you say you noted that you needed more information in your time as planning director, was that uncommon when you'd receive an application?
No, it's actually pretty common for most applications.
So what sort of follow-up would you do when you received an application and needed more information?
I would either email or call the applicant and let them know what information was missing or what else they would need for compliance.
I'm going to direct you to RD 008 in the record of decision. And particularly at the bottom of that page, do you recognize that email?
I do?
An email that you sent?
Yes.
You sent that email to whom?
To CDC, Sean Sains and Chris Day.
And again, anything unusual about communicating back to the entity that submitted an application like that about anything that you found to be incomplete?
No, nothing unusual.
I'm going to ask you to walk us through the things that you found you needed in that instance. So if you would just briefly summarize, what do you see here in your numbered list, 1 through 6?
I needed clarification on the type of building. I needed a landscaping plan, and I needed more information on parking, where it would be located, and whether bike racks would be provided, and I needed to know whether the open space would be landscaped or left in its natural state.
Okay. And I'm also seeing a note about density of units per acre. Looks like
Yeah,
you
I
said
needed
that
the
needed to be
density-
noted on the plan.
Right.
But that was already in compliance with the current.
It was already in
code, is that right?
compliance, yes.
I want to turn your attention to what's labeled RD 0013 through RD 0015. I want to ask the applicant, did we get larger? I don't think the town had on record, I apologize. These are big plans and they come out very small in this record and maybe a little bit hard to read.
We do not get from Chris Day today, or Chris Day shooting today, but hopefully tomorrow. I don't know, do you want us to hook up a computer? That way it would-
If it's possible to do, I would appreciate it. As he's bringing that up, Ms. Eisenhower, let me ask you, generally, do you recognize the documents that start at that page?
Yes, I do.
What are they?
They are site plans from CDC submitted on October 13th, 2021,
And pertaining to the same property?
pertaining to the same property.
Now, I should also ask, when, in your practice as the planning director, when you made requests, and I think you testified you did so frequently for applicants, did you expect a response in any particular format?
There was no requirement on the format. Sometimes it was in a response email, but sometimes it was in these, an updated site plan submittal.
So sometimes it would just come noted on the plat that got resubmitted to plan. And to the extent you can see it before we have a blown-up version, it is, so it's, if you've got the record of decision, it's, yeah, right there. So you may be close enough, yes. You may be close enough to see those, and, which is the bane of all attorneys. I want to walk you through each of the things you asked for and make sure that this October 13th submission gave you the information that you had requested. First off, did you see a clarification on the types of buildings that were to be built?
Yes. They had identified duplexes and triplexes and single-family homes.
Got it. It's 15.
And the note on the density of units per acre, was that noted?
It was.
Parking, is that noted?
Parking is shown on the site plan, yes.
And you had asked for a landscaping plan. What do you see on the plat?
They have identified location of street trees. I don't know that the landscaping plan is included.
So as a means of an initial application, though, did you find that to be particularly deficient? Would you have expected to see ordinarily a fully fleshed out landscaping plan?
Not necessarily at this point in the review process.
So it's something that maybe after an initial site plan review, you might have supplemented later by the applicant?
Yes, prior to approval.
And about open space, how it was to be used, I think you testified was one of your questions.
They have noted on the site plan that the open space will be left in its natural state.
And I'm not going to ask you to do the math in your head, but roughly what is the time period between May 17th and October, I think it came in the 13th?
About 5 months.
5 months. All right, I'm going to turn your attention now to what's, I'm going to turn your attention to what's in front of you and marked on the cover as the ordinance as of October 23rd, 2018. There are 2 copies of the ordinances that have been provided as this part of this presentation to the board this evening. And I think there is a marking on there for Chapter 54. Again, council, this is the same ordinance that, one of the 2 ordinances that we've provided. Do you recall, what's the effective date of this ordinance? And I think we've noted it in the record and it's on the cover there.
October 23rd, 2018.
And so you testified earlier that part of your job duties were to make sure that the ordinances were up to date and had been modernized, so to speak.
Yes.
So you would be knowledgeable about which ordinance was in effect at the time that this application was pending between May 2021 and October 2021?
Yes.
To your knowledge, is this the version of the ordinance that would have been applicable to that
Yes.
application? Okay.
Is that included in the RD that we're looking at in here, or is that somewhere?
No, and that.
No, that's another book. That's a different.
We can provide, I don't know how copies were provided, but they were in the, I think they were in the Dropbox.
Is it in the Dropbox?
They
The
were
one you're referring to.
in the Dropbox.
Yeah.
I have it on electronic
Yeah,
copy.
yeah.
That's what I was trying to see which.
I didn't want to print thousands of pages.
No,
No more
they're-
copies.
They're like 70. they're
I will
small.
do my best to always, get you oriented to
Yes,
the
yes, please.
applicable provisions. But what I'm actually want to ask is what, were there any proposals that changed what the zoning ordinances were for the adopted zoning ordinances were for the town of Woodfin between May and October?
There was an ordinance adopted in May of 2021, May 18th of 2021.
What was the purpose of that ordinance?
Compliance with 160D.
And what happened with that ordinance thereafter? Did it go into effect, or did something else happen?
A town attorney deemed it void in August, and so it was then taken off the books at that point.
What was your understanding about what ordinance was in effect at that point?
Can you rephrase the question?
When the town, at the advice of the then town attorney, declared that ordinance to be void, what was the zoning ordinance in effect?
The October 23rd, 2018 ordinance.
Basically, the one that's in front of you? I guess.
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to direct your attention to, back in the record of decision, RD 12. Do you recognize this document?
I do.
What is this document?
It was a letter submitted with the amended site plan that was submitted on October 13th.
And it has the same date.
It does.
Could you read the first sentence of the second paragraph, please?
Please confirm that the materials we have submitted are sufficient to constitute an application under the Town of Woodfin zoning ordinance. Town of Woodfin zoning ordinance in effect as of the date of your receipt of this letter.
Okay, that's plenty. So with your testimony that the zoning code that was in effect, the zoning ordinance in effect at that time, it wasn't any different on May 17th than it was on October 13th.
Right.
So do you recall you were able to, at least, what would your answer have been to that question? Were you able to say this is the same ordinance that's in effect?
Yes, I was able to say this is the same ordinance that was in effect on May 17th, that's in effect on October 13th.
So,
Can I ask a quick question? I'm just trying to follow those dates. So May 17th, 2021 is when the first application was, and then that change went in on May 18th, coincidentally, the next day, but then they removed it in August, so then it was back to what it was when they first applied.
Right.
So I was just listening to those May dates, they're just, they're a day apart.
Yeah.
Okay. All right,
so
thank you.
in the point being, in the October 13th submission you received, it's the same ordinance that had been applicable to the May
Yes. Yeah. Correct.
submission. Okay. There wasn't anything earth-shattering about saying, are we under the same ordinance? They were under the same ordinance, is that right? Okay.
Right.
Let me direct your attention now to page RD 23 through 26. Let me start with RD 23. Can you identify that document?
I'm sorry, I'm having a page number problem.
Okay.
RD 23 is a letter submitted from CDC on November 12th, 2021 with a additional application or alternative option for the property.
Okay. What did you understand that alternative option to be? I think we're okay, actually. 'Cause
It added a spa facility to the development.
And what were you able to, did you advise the applicant anything about the addition of that spa facility?
I let the applicant know that the addition of the spa facility created the need for a conditional use permit application and a quasi-judicial hearing based on the ordinance at the time that required a spa facility to receive a conditional use permit based on the standards listed in the Mountain Village District.
And is that, if you'll turn to RD 034, is that your communication of that fact to the applicant?
Yes.
So
34.
to help the board understand, you said this created a need for a conditional use permit for the spa facility.
Correct.
And who's the proper board to hear a conditional use permit?
Board of Adjustment.
And why is that, to your understanding about a zoning ordinance?
The conditional use permit requires a quasi-judicial hearing.
And so had everything in that plan until this was added wasn't a conditional use?
Correct.
And until this was added, wasn't?
Was not.
And then wasn't.
Was not conditional.
Correct.
In other words, it would have been subject to approval with a lower level of review than a quasi-judicial review by this board, by a quasi-judicial board. Okay. Now I want to turn your attention to RD 38 through 42. No, I apologize. Let me back up a step. What was your understanding about the developer's ultimate use of that spa facility plan? Did it stay in their plan, to your knowledge?
It was a, let me go back to that. It was an alternative option for the project.
So, I got the page number now. It's RD 28. Very good.
I don't seem to have 28.
It's on the left
Oh, I
side.
see it. Never mind. Have it.
You do have it, okay. Based on the second paragraph in that letter, what did you understand the applicant to be doing about the lodge and spa facility?
They were abandoning the proposed lodge facility and rescinding the November 12th amendment.
So, in effect, you advised what the ordinance said about that spa facility, right? And then it was removed, so it was never processed further as part of the zoning application.
Correct.
Is that right? Once it was removed, were there further, what was your understanding about what further process was needed? Were there any conditional uses at that point?
There were no conditional uses at that point.
All right, I'm going to turn your direction now to RD 38 through 42. If you got it. Can I ask you if you recognize this correspondence that you received?
I do.
And who was it from and on what subject?
It's from Jesse Swords requesting determination regarding master plan approval process for the Mountain Village District.
So you understood it was requesting a determination about what the next step for
Yes.
approval of the plan was. I'm going to turn you now to RD 46 through 49. Can you identify this letter and the couple of pages that follow it?
Yes, a letter from Sam Craig, the attorney for Planning Department at the time, in response to the Jesse Swords letter requesting determination for the process.
So Mr. Craig was an attorney that the Planning Department referred
Yes.
matters to. And what did you understand his opinion to be about the next step of the process?
I understood his opinion to be that the next step would be ministerial review of the site plan application by the planning board.
And did you recall if you reviewed the sections of the code, the zoning code that he cited to?
I do recall that I reviewed.
Were you in general agreement with his opinion?
I did agree with his opinion.
I'm going to turn your attention now to RD 54 and 55. Can you identify this document?
Yes, Mountain Village District Master Plan Checklist.
Is this checklist one that's specifically required by, or was specifically required by the applicable ordinance?
It's not specifically required by the ordinance, but it was something we put together internally to help us review the applications, but also to help the applicants submit the correct information.
So an administrative tool?
Yes.
you recall receiving a completed checklist from the applicant?
Yes.
I have the exact page, but. We turn you now to page RD 68. You recognize this letter?
I do.
What is this letter?
It is a letter to the applicant, letting them know that we view their application has expired based on permit choice statutes.
And do you remember what review led to your conclusion that had taken place?
We had recently gotten, the new town manager had started, and we were going through existing development files, and in looking through this file, it looked as if there had been a 6-month time period with no communication.
So did you receive anything from the applicant in response to this letter?
Yes.
And direct your attention to RD 70 through 77. Is that the letter that you received?
That is.
So, when you received this letter, what was the substance of it?
Disagreement with the fact that their application had expired.
And did it include anything to document alleged communications in that period of time?
Yeah, they pointed out some communications that had happened within that 6-month time frame. They brought that to our attention at that time.
And so you didn't disagree after review that
Right.
there had been communications and ongoing development there during that period?
Correct.
Is that then why, if you go to page RD 79, is that the purpose of this letter? Inform the applicant of that?
Yes, that is the purpose of that letter.
Let me ask you really briefly, earlier on, the board heard testimony about traffic impacts. Was there any required traffic study under the applicable part of the ordinance?
There was not.
So it's not like something the town missed.
No.
It's not required for that development.
Right.
So, and I think you testified that you changed positions in August of 2022?
Mhm.
So, with your last contact with this matter, what did you understand was left to be done in terms of processing applications?
The application was going to be heard by the planning board, or reviewed by the planning board in ministerial review.
When you say ministerial review, I want to make sure that the board understands, what does that mean?
It means that they're reviewing the application and comparing it to requirements of the zoning ordinance. And if the application meets those requirements, the application is approved. There's little discretion involved.
I have no further questions.
Thank you.
Yeah, so it's 9 o'clock. The town's asked Ms. Eisenhower of all of her questions. It would be, if we continue subject to cross-examination, and the board, I would suspect, would want to hear from both sides. HS Robin Hood and the other parties withstanding, the Bernsteins and CRLU. So in that it's past 9 o'clock, this board has said we are going to stop at 9 o'clock. You're welcome to do that now, but if you want to plug along, which I don't think you do, which I don't want to do, yeah. Now would be a good time, not to adjourn, but just to continue the hearing of this matter until tomorrow night.
Do I need a motion to continue this?
Yeah, 5 o'clock, yep, same time, same place, yes.
Okay, do I have a motion to continue this meeting at 5 PM tomorrow?
I'll motion.
Second?
Second.
In favor?
Aye.
Aye. It's approved, so moved, so meeting,
That was really helpful, by the way.